Comic Geek Speak presents The Crisis Tapes, Episode 11, Crisis on Infinite Earths, Number 1, Part 2.
Welcome back to the Crisis Tapes, probably a lot sooner than some of you expected. I'm Adam Murdo.
I'm Peter Rios.
And, we were just, we got ourselves going in our last episode. We just thought we had to just keep on riding this wave of energy while it lasted. We still got that crisis buzz going on. We're still within a month of the publication of the first issue. We thought we'd better just keep on striking that iron while it was hot.
Sounds good. That's a mouthful, that title. Oof.
Well, thank you for undertaking it.
No problem.
Your lips are a little limberer tonight than mine are.
Okay. Well, how about we start off with a little bit of feedback. We've got much excitement on the forum, on Facebook, on Twitter. People just, they can't believe their eyes that there's a crisis episode. And
I think their eyeballs are going to implode when they see a second episode within a couple of weeks.
That's amazing. We're not going to read everything, but, thank you so much for the feedback. I certainly read it all. I'm sure Adam has as well.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. And there are a couple questions that came up that really deal with stuff that's not for, almost till the end of the Maxi series.
Right. Trying to deal with things in their original published sequence here. So.
Right. Yeah. So I'm sure, I'll keep track of some of those things. But there are a couple things in here that I thought would be fun to read. How about we start with Caliban's post there?
Okay. And you said I could read this one, so.
Yeah.
All right, so from our friend Dr. Eamon Clark over in the UK, a.k.a. Caliban, Crisis Math. Total time taken on footnotes and first 10 pages, 20 hours and 21 minutes. Time taken for those 10 pages was 2 hours plus change, call it 12 minutes a page. There are another 326 pages to go, which is 3,912 minutes, or 65 and a bit hours to come. Time bubble technology might be needed. And, Eamon, my friend, you didn't even take into account the crossovers.
Oy. Yeah. Well, speaking of that, too, DM Hate says... If you're a huge fan of Crisis, he is listening to the graphic audio version of Marv Wolfman's later novelization. And he asks, basically he says, hope you cover that novel as well as are we intending to go through any of the tangents, like either the crossover issues that came out with each month's issues or that 4.5 issue that came out years later?
Well, the crossover issues, I think, are going to be a definite yes. I mean, we took the time to talk about the Monitor's little dinky cameos throughout the year 1984. I think we can definitely deal with these Crisis crossovers, some of which were extremely important to the main story, others of which were utterly tangential, just like a bunch of characters going, oh, look, the sky's red. And that was it's kind of become a running joke, actually, in the years to come. Any kind of a so-called crossover chapter or tie-in with a major event that just doesn't go any further than mentioning offhandedly that something's going on in other books in the same universe and doesn't really tie into the main story in any way more meaningful than that. But anyway, whether Red Sky crossover or more substantive crossover, we will be dealing with all of the bannered Crisis tie-ins and even a couple of non-bannered ones as these episodes wear on, but and we'll probably do them in their own separate episodes, as opposed to trying to incorporate discussions of the crossovers in episodes otherwise devoted to talking about issues of the main series. But yeah, right. We're going to get around to the crossovers eventually, and Peter and I really haven't discussed this too much, but that things like the ancillary texts like that Legends of the DCU Crisis number 4.5 that DM Hate mentioned by Wolfman and Paul Ryan. Yeah, that's something we definitely could address, but we'll have to decide among ourselves, Peter, whether or not we want to do that between our episodes on issue 4 and issue 5, or if we just want to hold that off until much later.
Yeah, and I'm no mind reader, but I'm wondering if you have the same thought I do in the sense that we are sort of taking a chronological look at this, and I think it's probably going to have more weight after the 12 issues are wrapped up to talk about it when it actually was released.
Right.
Yeah.
Because it was written at a distance of about 10 years from the conclusion of the actual crisis. And more than that, actually. I was in college, so we're talking late 90s. So, yeah, more like 12 or 13 years after Crisis wrapped. And it was kind of written in hindsight from the perspective of the late 90s. It was really more of a product of the late 90s. So even though it was intended to be inserted in a reading chronology in between issues 4 and 5, it's really a late 90s comic. And it's kind of it's a retrospect treatment of Crisis and the events thereof. So I think I do agree, Peter. It's probably better served just putting that off until sometime after we've dealt with all 12 issues and footnoted them thoroughly.
Not to mention, I mean, think about all right. So we already have 2 parts on this first issue, and I'm assuming that we're going to get it done tonight. But if not, then we go to part 3. So we have 12 issues. 2 of them are double sized after this issue. We have all those crossovers. No doubt we're going to do post episodes. We could potentially do post episodes of, we sort of gave a status quo of this DC universe prior to Crisis. Well, we could certainly do the same post.
You bet we could.
There's the history of the DC universe 2-part mini-series that we could look at. And along with that, like you said, that Legends 4.5 issue, I mean, the Crisis was constantly revisited after a point. There's that DC Legacies 2-parter. There was a Dead Man miniseries that the first issue went on to address some of the stuff in Crisis with Flash.
There was an issue of that John Ostrander JLA Incarnations that it had a special Crisis crossover banner across the top.
Yeah,
and it was published in like 2001.
Yeah, I mean, just Crisis-centric alone, Crisis on Infinite Earths, there are plenty of. There was that Stan Lee. Just imagine Stan Lee creating the Crisis, which is completely different. But
that would be fun to talk about.
Yeah, so I mean, there's a lot of stuff that we can go, but I think you're right. I think we just need to stick with what we have now, and let's just power through all that before we get too tangential. No pun intended.
Yeah.
Oh, you have something else?
No.
2 more here, real quick. So let's. This one is from Jack Soar, and he says, maybe you could have a segment where those of us who read Crisis on its initial release could offer some memories, and certainly that's not my role, but that's what I'm trying to bring to it as much as I can. But yes, that's absolutely emails, voicemails, anything that. Yep. Any kind of feedback that you would normally give to CGS, this is part of that, and we would certainly play some things about that, because I'm sure there's everybody. I think we mentioned it last episode. This whole idea of being a Crisis kid. I mean, it was huge. It was huge. Just such a weird publishing thing that DC was doing, and I'm sure many people had many different reactions to it.
Yep, and we would be more than happy to hear reactions of other Crisis kids out there. So as Peter said, email works just fine. You can reach us at either murd@comicgeekspeak.com or peter@comicgeekspeak.com. As far as voicemail, we have a number here. It's 267-702-6642 if you want to leave a Crisis-related voicemail. Or you could just post your thoughts to the Crisis Tapes episode talkback threads at thecomicforums.com. Which is where we got the comment from Caliban and the inquiry about how we're going to treat crossovers and stuff like that. So,
right. And one more here, Derek Wilsey or Derek Wills asks if we can touch on 2 trivia questions. The first one being, Dick Giordano originally asked which writer-artist to handle a very early incarnation of Crisis, which would end with the DC Universe ending, and the following month, all issues being restarted at number 1. So which writer-artist, meaning one person, and then the second question is which artist was originally announced as handling the art chores on the book?
Worthy Crisis fun facts both, and I do not know the answer to either of those questions.
Yeah, and I don't either. I've never, although the second part about an artist originally announced as handling the art chores, George Corey, you know George Corey, right?
Oh, sure. Yeah, from
Right.
Tomorrow's?
Yes, from Tomorrow's, and he's working on a book right now called Comic Book Fever, which looks to be amazing. I think it's coming out this summer sometime. He messaged me on Twitter a while back with that same question. And at that time, I sort of said, really? There was a... Really? It just kind of, for no pun intended, it stumped me a little bit. And I wasn't sure. But then now this poster is saying the same thing. And then I put this in with his first question about what writer artist. I don't know. Some of it is, I always just consider this Marv Wolfman's baby because of his early connections with, the Monitor being a character called the Librarian.
Right. So something he made up when he was a kid.
Yeah, him and Len Wein coming to DC and talking about, the 50th anniversary thing. So I don't know quite where, if Derek knows the answer, by all means, please let us know. Or if he wants us to, if anybody else knows, I would almost need to see it in print somewhere before I would take someone's memory, because of all the articles I've read, I've never heard any of this. Not that it's not a possibility, but if there's a fanzine, if there's an article you can scan, I would love to see actual documented proof of this.
So was I.
Yeah.
Actually, one other idea for an episode I'd had a while ago was like a crisis in the fan press episode, where we took some time to look at how different fan publications of that time were looking at the crisis events and whatever hype that DC was building around it, or that the magazines themselves were building around it. So if you can find any print mention of these proto creators of Crisis, as Peter said, we'd like to see it. Yeah.
So all great feedback, that and everything else that other people wrote. Some of them just excited that there was an episode. So here's to more.
Yep. Thank you very much for writing in. We're kind of excited too.
Yeah. All right.
Now down to brass tacks, huh?
Yes.
Time to get back to the issue itself. All right. So when we left our heroes, it was we got as far as the first half of page 13.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's Lila powered up, split herself off into several different Harbinger selves and dispatched them to different Earths, different time periods to recruit, to take part in the summoning, to bring the agents that the Monitor needed for the phase 1 of his desperate scheme to protect the remaining Earths of the multiverse.
Right. Harbinger's splitting of her body, of her energy, reflecting the very first pages of this issue of the origins of the DC universe, also splitting where one should have been one, it became many.
I see. Yeah.
Yeah.
So the lower right-hand panel on page 12 echoes the third panel down on page 1.
Yeah.
Wow.
Nice little. I think it makes sense too, especially with the whole each one being weaker than if it was just one whole. I think there's something to say about Harbinger as well.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes, we'll see evidence of that as this second half of this issue unfolds.
Right. And in Monitor's possession, he does have, he is going to get Alexander Luthor Jr., who was sent from the destroyed Earth 3. And Earth 3 so far is the only named Earth that we know of. We were shown 2 Earths dying, but Earth 3 is the one that we as DC readers would know by this point. Just trying to give some listeners a catch-up of what we've gone over to this point. So now we get into the DC universe that we really know, or should know, or...
that we would know if we were reading DC Comics in 1985.
Yeah. And I think this is where, initially when we didn't go over the characters on the cover in fine detail, I think this is where we can finally start doing that for one, and then try to speculate on, why. Why did the Wolfman choose these characters? And, if you know of anything, we'll just share our thoughts back and forth. So,
some cases I have an idea, in others I have none.
Yeah. And believe me, none of this is. I don't think any of my picks or my speculations are. It's not like I've read proof of it. It's just fun hindsight speculation. Some I think could really stick, and other stuff that's just seems a little obvious, and other stuff I'm pulling out my butt.
Yeah, and I have to confess, I did not do a first-hand interview with Marv Wolfman when I was preparing my thesis research. If I had just gotten together with CGS before I went away to grad school, could have taken advantage of those connections, I probably could have gotten an interview with him.
Yeah.
But as it is, I never did that, to my regret.
And by this point, he's probably sick of and tired of talking about Crisis. So
yeah, I don't think he needed another Crisis nerd coming sniffing around his doorstep, trying to pick his brain. But anyway, so we begin here with one of the more interesting recruits that Harbinger was sent to fetch. So she soars down to Africa of Earth 1. We know this for a fact because she's heading to a setting with which Barry Allen, the Earth 1 Flash, has had frequent dealings and to which he's made frequent visits. It's a little jungle valley in Africa, an Africa known only to a very few. Gorilla City.
Dun, dun, dun.
And we find its wise and benevolent king, Solivar. I think we mentioned in the last issue that his name is misspelled throughout this issue, and I think his subsequent appearances in the next issue or two. It's spelled Solivar. It's actually supposed to be Solovar, as in the wise Solomon. Solivar. And that is one of the little errors that were redacted and corrected in the reprint editions and collections of the Crisis series. They amended that to Solo. And we find the aforementioned Solivar sitting he's holding court. He's actually meting out some justice to a recently apprehended guerrilla criminal named Chorus, and being a wise, just, and merciful monarch. He goes out of his way to say that man's justice demands an eye for an eye, as if he knew some members of the offensive species were listening in. But we apes need not be so barbaric. And so instead of sentencing Chorus to death, because Chorus is a murderer, Solivar sentences him to the more humane punishment of conversion.
Go and become a useful, productive citizen. And now leave me, there are weightier troubles which plague me.
Yes, and so heavy hanging the head that wears the crown, he wanders out of his throne room to brood about the very problem that is the central problem of the Crisis Maxi series.
Why don't we go through to the end of each character's scene, and then we can go back, because this takes place over 2 pages, so we might as well keep going, and then we'll go back and sort of talk about some stuff.
Yep. It seems like 2 pages, or in some cases 1.5, is the average devoted to each recruit.
Right.
All right, so Solivar goes back to his private quarters, and he's apparently guerrilla science, since the science in Gorilla City is in advance of what is known to human civilization on Earth 1. He is aware of the coming danger to Earth 1, to Earth 1's universe and many other universes besides. He doesn't seem to know many specifics, but his scientists have told him that, quote, our planet faces deadly peril. And he takes a cheap shot at human beings. I cannot understand why man has done nothing to... And then Harbinger pops in. Solivar wonders aloud, who besides the Flash knows we exist? Harbinger shoots right back. The Monitor knows all, Solivar. He has seen the birth of this city as well as others hidden from the eyes of man. And then he summons Solivar to participate in a great adventure. Solivar tries to, physically eject her from his chambers, but he's unable to actually touch her using her phasing ability. Since she's just a part of Harbinger, just one of the energy duplicates she sent throughout all reality. She's not entirely material to begin with, but she phases completely through his arm. Then as his guards come in, she just grabs Solivar and teleports away with him, leaving a parting shot for the guards. You apes are more highly advanced than humans, yet like them, as if she's not a human being. She's speaking from outside both species. Yet, like them, your first instinct is to violence. How sadly similar are your species? And then she and Solovar are gone.
So, just some real quick surface observations. First time we see Harbinger outside of the cover. It was the first time in the story pages we actually see her design.
Right, as Harbinger, as opposed to just as Lila.
Yeah. It's kind of reminiscent of a Starfire-esque costume, if you know George Perez's design for Starfire, where a lot of it is metal. I'm thinking in particular her boots have kind of a similar, not quite similar design, but they live in the same world. All the metal stuff, all the line work, but then up around her shoulders, her two arms are asymmetrical.
Right.
One of them is,
Exactly. I was thinking that myself, asymmetrical design, and this is very 80s. A lot of costume designs in the 80s were like that.
Yeah. And I always was fascinated by her headpiece, that it covers almost everything, but then she just has this billowing hair, section of hair coming out. I don't know why. I was just, and I guess maybe too because it's red, it kind of stands out and sticks out. So,
I always kind of thought that the those two side pieces. Leave it to me to pay attention to things that look like sideburns on people's faces, but it's kind of reminiscent of the things that the Monitor has in the side of his face too.
I'll give you that. Yeah.
Those can be described as sideburns, literally, but her helmet kind of makes her look like she's got the same facial structure.
Yeah, I guess if I cheat and go back to the deeper in and look at Monitor, there's some similarities in the costume, not enough to make them look like total companions, but I'm thinking specifically around the belt area, that little A-line effect thing going on, kind of similar to the Monitor's skirt.
Call it a tunic.
Tunic thing, all right.
Yeah, preserve his dignity.
Okay. And also kind of like the collar design, the swooping collar going over her bare shoulder. Sort of, he also has kind of like a circlet around him. But it's not enough to be a total comparison. Enough to live in the same world.
Right. There's some fashion genes in common.
Yeah. Do you have any thoughts on why you think the Wolfman and Monitor chose Solovar in all of this?
It is nothing too specific. It's an interesting choice, as I said earlier, but I guess he's kind of a reflection of one of these. He's a time-honored DCU concept taking its origin in the Silver Age. And DC is trying to pay homage to as much of its own history as possible here. I think they probably knew at this point that the Flash was going to be biting it, and that the Flash, as a result, was not going to be playing. He wasn't going to be physically present for a lot, or actively participating in a lot of the story as a whole. So maybe just transferring in some secondary element of his part of the DC universe. Of course, by that thinking, you might want to bring in like Elongated Man or Kid Flash, but instead we get Solovar.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I guess he represents wisdom. The wisdom that comes with closeness to nature. This is the 80s. Maybe he ties into 80s ecological movements, closeness to nature, the lessons that we as humans can learn from the wisdom of the animal kingdom. I'm definitely pulling things out of my butt at this point.
Yeah, I mean, I think the Flash thing was the closest connection that I could make, that they knew that what they were going to do with the Flash. They also knew at this point that the Flash was in the future. And I wondered if part of the reason why you would bring Solovar, of all characters, who's not very powerful in a physical sense.
No, not indeed. He's not even really of all the characters that Wolfman selected, and there are 15 of them in all, he's the only one that's not like a combatant type character. He's not easily classifiable as hero or villain. He's a staunch, steadfast ally of a DCU hero of long standing, so we probably call him a hero for that reason, but he doesn't usually participate in the battles between hero and villain.
And I wondered if that was the reason why, maybe just kind of like a soft allusion to him being a surrogate of the Flash. You know, maybe because of the technology, maybe he would have been one of the characters that could be honest enough, that could understand the situation enough, and also have some of the knowledge of what Flash would have without actually having Flash there. Now, I know you said Kid Flash, but then that speaks to a little bit of nepotism, right? You know, why, if Wolfman already wants Cyborg in this, you know, bringing Kid Flash, you know, now you got 2 new Teen Titans characters on there, and then everybody suddenly says, oh, you're just showcasing, you know, those characters. Plus, if they knew what they were going to do with Flash, they probably knew what they were going to do with Kid Flash by the end of this as well, saving him for later, you know.
Yeah. Now that I think of it, wasn't Wally having problems with his powers at this point in time, too?
That is true, yeah. Yeah, he was going through sort of like a self-exile for a while. I like what you said about the whole nature thing, though, too. I like that. You know, this the whole scientific aspect. If he is a being of a higher culture, I think it's some of the other things could be, as you said, you know, going to Gorilla City is a very clear Earth One delineation. You know, if Wolfman had to gather characters, how do you do it in such a shorthand way without having to each time go, okay, this is Earth One and he's blah, 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 blah. You know, you can do that, but you could also do it just by hoping that your readers are savvy enough to go, oh yeah, Gorilla City, Flash, Barry Allen, Earth One, got it. So I kind of lumped all those things in there. Trying to think of as a writer's, you know, sort of like trying to use, and, you know, yes, we totally get that all this could have been, they just threw a bunch of names in a hat and they pulled it out. But it's much more fun to think of it in these kind of terms.
Yeah, I think. To assume that there's a method to the madness and then try to reverse engineer that.
Yeah.
It could just be that they wanted a non-human character of some kind in there, too.
Oh, yeah. I think the first couple selections that they choose are very interesting, non-traditional choices. You know, they go across the demographic of not only human, but not only gender, I should say, but humans as well, species as well.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And within the human species, there's the concept of race.
Right.
So we've got that kind of diversity coming into play as well.
Yeah. A couple other things. So he says, but who besides the Flash knows we exist? We could probably make a long list of names of who else besides the Flash knows that Gorilla City's there. Kid Flash being one of them, probably. So,
did Hal Jordan ever find out?
I don't know.
I kind of think that at some point somebody came up with an alternate origin for Gorilla City. In putting forth that the Gorilla City actually was a city from the planet Kalor, and they somehow used the energy from a Green Lantern's ring to teleport themselves to Africa years ago. But that I forget where that story first appeared. It was in something like Super Team Family or one of those, you know, secondary 70s DC Comics. Fans didn't care for it, and it was. They actually went out of their way to put a note in Who's Who in the Gorilla City entry to say that this is non-canonical and inaccurate, and just forget about it.
Oh, wow.
So I wouldn't be surprised if Hal Jordan at some point did learn of it, but his mind might not have retained the knowledge. Because remember, in Gorilla City, they've got that beacon that broadcasts special waves throughout, on the frequency of human brain waves throughout the world that automatically erases all knowledge of Gorilla City from the minds of anyone who accidentally learns about it, except the Flash.
I know in one of the rare few submissions that I sent to DC, I was trying to connect a few characters that had any kind of relation to the origin trope of being powered by a meteor and tying it all into the Promethean giant wall, the wall of the new gods of the Promethean giants,
Mm-hmm.
and that it, like a large chunk. Oh God, it gets even more crisis and deeper than that. That a controller actually was trying to siphon off a chunk of it, and in the process, it wound up hurtling through time and space, and it was the artifact that powered Captain Comet and Vandal Savage and
Mortal Man.
Mortal Man.
Yep.
And I also thought I think the gorillas from Gorilla City were part of it too. And I don't even, it was a few more. I had like a few, I think, what's his face? Super Buffalo? No, what's
Super Chief.
Yeah, Super Chief. Because I think Red Star was also affected. It was like this whole big thing. I was just going to try to connect everybody. But
Work Animal Man in there, maybe? Although Grant Morrison already kind of deconstructed that as far as it could go.
I'd have to show, but that's a tangent.
It's a neat idea, though.
Yeah. So some of the reason why I point that out, the whole thing about who besides the Flash knows we exist, is because I love Wolfman's sense of hyperbole throughout a lot of this stuff. Harbinger says that the Monitor has seen the birth of this city, so clearly he's been monitoring longer than just a few months, like he said they alluded to earlier in this issue and elsewhere. And the only other thing, I love that she says, "Come with me, a great adventure awaits." What is she trying to sell him when she says a great adventure awaits? And meanwhile, she's going to say, "Oh, by the way, your worlds are dying." What kind of adventure is that? I don't know.
Something out of an Edgar Rice Burroughs novel, maybe?
Yeah, maybe.
Trying to play to her audience, or at least playing to her stereotypical conceptions of her audience.
Yeah, could be.
Kriega, Bundalo.
So that's what I had for those 2 pages. Those are my notes.
All right, so on to the next draftee.
Do you want me to do this one?
Okay, sure. We'll take turns.
Okay. Near and dear to my heart here, we have... we talked about this in the cover about how not only is this a multiverse, but also dealing with time. And here we are. This page and a half shows us that the next character to be taken by Harbinger, brought in by Harbinger, is Dawnstar of the 30th century Earth, the future of Earth 1 at this point. 30th century Metropolis. If you are a fan of Legion of Superheroes, you would probably already had recognized her on the cover and inside the issue as well. And she is making her way through the recently rebuilt Legion headquarters, which is just an allusion to something that's been going on in Legion of Superheroes, where they did get a brand new headquarter because of Computo, and what was once an orange
upside down spaceship.
Yeah, well, no, even between that the orange. It was like a building. It was like more of a brick, more sort of like construction material. Then becomes this metallic silver, very iconic headquarters that the Legion would have throughout the most of the 80s and the Baxter Run and all that. And where the top of it is actually a spaceship. So cool. Anyway, so she's wondering who has summoned her. She feels a telepathic summons. She begins to chase a light, and that she sees off in the distance. And this is where you get a little bit of, Chris Claremont-esque type thought balloons, where you get to see what kind of powers that she has. And she says, "I'm a tracker. I can follow one pebble spinning through the Mutaran asteroid belt." And the light leads her to Suicide Slum, which is a very Metropolis kind of thing, even in the future. She says, "Despite my powers, I usually avoid this area." And she sees the light. She calls out to it. Nobody answers. So she goes up to, it sort of looks like a storage unit, and she taps in some kind of code. I don't know how she would know what the code is, but and out from the very wall itself, very much like what was going on in Gorilla City, where Harbinger literally just steps out from a wall, her hand comes through, grabs Dawnstar. She's not as casual, or not casual. The dialogue's different. The personality is different. I need you, Dawnstar. Come with me now. She just grabs her, and Dawnstar vanishes in a puff of light. The tracker from Starhaven vanishes.
Right. Starhaven being kind of like an Indian reservation, except in the form of a planet.
Right.
Yep, where Dawnstar's people, who are called Amarins in the 30th century lingo, that's where they've chose to settle in outer space, and that's where she was born, where she's from.
Right.
Apparently, those wings of hers are not uncommon feature in residents of Starhaven, but and tracking abilities too. But hers are she's a mutant in that her tracking abilities are even stronger by several factors than like the average Starhavenite.
Right. If you're looking at the cover, King Solivar is actually on the back cover, a little bit right above John Stewart, Green Lantern, and Dawnstar is on the front cover, right under the letter C of Crisis. She's the one with the wings, and she has all the fringe, evoking I guess, an Indian-esque costume there.
Yes, by way of the 30th century and outer space.
And George Paris. Or no, he didn't design it. I shouldn't say that, but he's giving it the extra fringe anyway.
Yeah. Was she a Cockrum design, do you know?
I should, but maybe Paul French and Darren Noel might know and all that.
That is a question for the Legion of Substitute podcasters.
Yeah, unfortunately, that kind of specific Legion stuff is not quite the same as sort of my Titans knowledge, but...
Yes. I remember she first appeared in Superboy number 225 or 6. Let me take a look here. Here we go. According to this, James Sherman.
Okay.
All right. Not a penciler whose work I know.
Yeah. She's one of the Legionnaires, at least for me, that I feel is less Legionnaire than most of the other ones, because she's never really given too much spotlight. She's always just mixed up into Wildfire, the character Wildfire. They have this on-again, off-again romance, unrequited love kind of thing. She's usually to herself. She didn't really have a lot of personality. It wasn't until later that I think Paul Levitz and Keith Giffen finally took a shine to her and gave her a little bit more of stuff to do. So I actually like that they chose her of all of the Legionnaires.
Forcing her to work with a bunch of characters that she hasn't even had a chance to learn to trust. And how long did it take her to warm up to her fellow Legionnaires?
Yeah.
And here she is being thrown in with this motley crew that Harbinger's gathering. Yeah, and I'm feeling you on the aloofness, the distance. How she didn't have a whole lot of personality, and she was kind of on the taciturn side. Well, she's a soarer of the spaceways, so she's used to being by herself out there in the void. So it's understandable her social skills would have suffered a little bit. But two, I think maybe she may have fallen prey to certain Native American stereotypes.
Mm-hmm.
That might have the mere fact that her superpower is superior tracking ability. That's talking about a superpower that's kind of keyed to the cultural context of the person wielding them.
Yeah.
But still, she's a fantastic visual, if nothing else.
That is very true. I think I've always liked her because of that, and I wonder if again, sort of speaking of, okay, who can we, because the Legion of Superheroes at this time is a very popular book, so I totally understand the Wolfman's choice of wanting a Legionnaire. If you're going to go to the 30th century, of course you're going to focus on the Legion. And using that character is great because she doesn't get much spotlight. She is visually appealing. She has a nice design to her. And I think it's her power could be very easily explained as, okay, we need a tracker. We need someone who can lead these people, maybe if they had to go somewhere. I sort of get it.
They need to, say, find a giant tuning fork someplace. And So, yeah. Plus a little added ethnic diversity.
Mm-hmm. Right. Oh, right.
We've said in earlier episodes of this show, one of Wolfman's key objectives here, what he thought he was doing when he set about rebooting DC continuity, was to create additional ethnic diversity. Just restart some characters and let them belong to different ethnic groups or have different racial backgrounds than they'd had before.
Yeah.
Of course, he didn't ultimately end up accomplishing that, but at least here, he's able to bring in, say, an American Indian, albeit one from outer space, and a woman at that, to be a part of this away team that the Monitor is putting together.
Yeah. And I think, too, just the other thought of, okay, if we're going to showcase the diversity of DC Comics, 50 years of DC Comics, why not showcase the true diversity of it? I don't even mean diversity in terms of, well, I guess I do, maybe, in terms of race, gender, and all that. But, just, look, we have talking apes, which is such a DC thing.
Totally.
We got flying winged women, from the future. So I think on that aspect alone, I don't know how much in their head they were thinking of, when they rebranded the New 52 and they started that whole madness. Obviously, they had very much had in their minds of creating IPs, intellectual properties. But I don't know if they had that so much so back here. But if they did, maybe they could say, hey, we're celebrating our 50th anniversary. Here's the first issue of a big event. Look at all the fun characters we have. They're not all just, blonde white men.
Yes, I definitely see the truth of that.
Yeah. Another way you can tell that this is the 30th century and this is just a fun DC thing, just like Gorilla City, is in the very top panel on page 15. The Earth is covered with a polymer shield that is explained as a way to keep the Earth protected and the atmosphere protected, and to keep the space travel, keep an eye on space travel and all that stuff. So when you are seeing her fly through Metropolis and the sky, it's a starry sky, but it's kind of gray. That's because that's the shield that is surrounding the Earth. That was part of the Legion of Superhero lore, definitely in the 70s, and I should say definitely in the 80s. I don't know how far back it went. Maybe 70s. I don't know if it went to 60s.
Yeah, almost certainly not. But
yeah.
But thank you for pointing that out, though, Peter, because I would have missed it completely.
And then they eventually would get rid of it during, in between the Baxter run and the 5 years later run, where the Earth, where the United Planet suffers a mass economic meltdown, and I believe they had to remove the shield because of it. I guess the upkeep was too expensive. But I love the plastic screen. That's such a great Legion thing.
Yeah, another great Legion thing. You mentioned the new headquarters building there. It's got what looks like a letter L on the top there, which is not actually a Roman letter L, but a letter in the futuristic Interlac alphabet. And it's the one letter of the Interlac alphabet that happens to look almost exactly like its equivalent in the modern-day Roman alphabet.
Yeah.
And by sheer coincidence, it's also the first letter in the name of the group of characters that happen to live in an era where Interlac is used.
Yeah.
So L for Legion or Interlac L for Legion, either way.
Yep. That was it. The only other thing was, and this is I could say this every sequence, is what a showcase that Perez gets from going from Gorilla City to the 30th century and then to the next one, to the World War II, Earth 2, and just he gets to play around with settings, and that's an amazing feat for someone like Perez. You can tell he's a gifted storyteller because of it.
No denying.
So you want to go to Earth 2?
Oh, sure. Let's go to Earth 2, and zipping back, from the far future to the near past, I guess. It's a matter of 43 years as of the time of the series' original publication. Back to 1942, when the United States has just recently entered the ever-growing conflict of World War II. And what else? We're in the middle of a war bond rally. How many Golden Age superheroes participated, in whether within the text of their stories or in advertisements, in the comic books in which Golden Age superheroes appeared. Raising funds for war bonds was something that they occupied themselves with. And sure enough, here we have a superhero in her civilian guise who is helping out behind the scenes at a war bond rally. This is Danette Riley, sister of Rod Riley, an actual Golden Age superhero, not originally a DC character. He was a Quality Comics character. He was called Firebrand. He had no superpowers. He was just a swashbuckling, two-fisted crime buster in a puffy pink shirt. But his sister managed to acquire flame-based powers. So while her brother Rod is off serving in the armed services during World War II, she has taken on the identity of Firebrand, and she is a member of the central cast of the All-Star Squadron series that was being published and going strong by DC at about this time. And here we see Danette Riley, a.k.a. Firebrand, calming down a friend of hers named Kara, who's trying to light a stove to get her cake ready in time. I guess there's going to be some kind of bake auction later on at this bond rally. Danette just tells her that she'll take care of everything, shoos Kara away, and then with a grin and a wink, she uses her fire powers to relight the pilot. And then suddenly she discovers that time is frozen around her, and Harbinger has appeared in the kitchen with her, addressing her by her superhero name, Firebrand, we need you. Come with me. She demands that Harbinger tell her how she knows who she is. And she says, Danette Riley, I am Harbinger, and we need you. Repeating herself, your planet is imperiled. And Danette offers to go and get the rest of the All-Star Squadron, but Harbinger demurs and says, no, Danette, it is you. Specifically you I need, or rather it is Firebrand. And Harbinger, with a gesture, puts Danette Riley into her Firebrand costume right away. Tells her to come with her and all will be made clear. Danette decides to herself that she's going to just... somehow she trusts Harbinger for reasons she can't define. And then she makes a period-appropriate crack about clicking her heels together and saying there's no place like home, since the Wizard of Oz movie was only 3 years old as of 1942. Would have been fresh in Danette's mind. Harbinger invites Firebrand to take her hand in a nifty little Sistine Chapel reference there in that panel on page 17. And the two of them disappear, but... a sinister, silhouetted figure has watched them leave. Dark, sinister eyes widen with interest, and a deep, throaty laugh echoes throughout the room. End quote. And that's all we get of Danette Riley, Firebrand 2.
Yeah.
All right. Now, I do have a theory about why this particular character was chosen here.
Okay.
We're trying to, as we've already said a couple of times over, we're trying to represent as wide a range of different settings and types of character that DC has to offer as possible. So we do have one or two characters from the future and one or two also from the past. And the All-Star Squadron series was pretty prominent from DC at this time. And since it was one of only a couple to be set on Earth 2, Infinity Inc. being another biggie in that category, both written and overseen by writer-editor, ye writer-editor, as he liked to call himself, Roy Thomas. He's kind of like DC's Earth 2 czar. He was... if you wanted to do anything with Earth 2 as a setting or its characters, you kind of had to go through him. So, and as I've said a few times over, I've always felt very deeply for Roy Thomas for what Crisis did to him, because Earth 2 as a setting and the characters that dwelt thereon were always very near and dear to his heart as a fan of these characters going back to the Golden Age. Talking about you being a Crisis kid, he was an actual Golden Age kid. Mm-hmm. And he was one of the first, he was in the vanguard of the first generation of fans of comics who grew up then to create comics.
Right.
And it was a dream come true for him to use all these old Golden Age heroes that he remembered and tell new stories with them, even coming up with new, quote-unquote, Golden Age characters of his own devising to participate in these adventures with them. And Firebrand is actually an example of that. He created the Danette Riley character. I'm pretty sure that Rod Riley, the Quality Comics Firebrand, didn't have a sister in his originally published adventures. And so he, on his own initiative, he came up with it. Well, in the early issues of All-Star Squadron, he introduced a couple of characters that technically that were Quality Comics characters. Phantom Lady was a major central member of the All-Star Squadron cast in the early issues, even though she, as far as DC fans knew to that point, should have been an Earth X character. She was a member of the Freedom Fighters, as we were told some time ago that Earth X equaled Quality Comics Earth. But Roy Thomas introduced the idea that perhaps the Earth X characters originated on Earth 2. And when we start talking about Crisis crossovers, there are a couple of issues of All-Star Squadron that really dig into that in much more detail, the connection between Earth 2 and Earth X. But so he took this Quality/Earth X character and established that he had a sister. And when Rod Riley went off to war, she got herself mixed up with some of her brother's erstwhile crime-fighting allies, ended up getting synthetic I think she fell into a vat of synthetic lava is how she got her powers. And she gained these heat and flame-based powers and became a member of the team. And she's based on Roy Thomas's wife, Dan. Mm-hmm. Dan Thomas, his wife and frequent writing partner, actually. So this is a character that means quite a bit to Roy. And so I can sort of see Thomas choosing her of all the possible Earth 2, All-Star Squadron, World War II era characters to include in Monitor's original away team. I think perhaps including this specific character was something like a propitiatory gesture to Roy, saying, sorry, we're going to yank Earth 2 out from under you, but at least we're going to give this character that you created based on your wife and that you love so much a little extra play here before we go ahead and do that to you.
Yeah. I also like the notion, I thought, and you may have been implying that, of maybe they did go to these people and say, hey, Paul Levitz, give me a Legionnaire to put in the first issue. Hey, Roy Thomas, give me a All-Star Squadron. I wonder how much of that actually happened, too, especially with Roy Thomas, because he was, as you said, the keeper of the keys of Earth 2 at this point.
Yep. And despite what his seeing the writing on the wall, I have heard from a couple of different sources that Roy Thomas did everything he could to collaborate and just to really pull his weight and do his part with bringing this Crisis event together. And he gave them reams of suggestions for what he'd like to see happen, short of it surviving with Earth 2 and its denizens. Yeah. So, yeah, you're probably right, Peter. They probably did put a call out to various writers or editors and asking them, okay, which characters would you like to give us to use in such and such a way? Yeah, especially because, as you said, the All-Star Squadron was also a very popular book. Maybe not in terms of what New Teen Titans and Legion superheroes, but... Probably not, yeah. Yeah, but definitely it was a decent series for readers, and because it was the only connection to Earth 2, and how think of its place in history as being specifically on another Earth. DC actually publishing a book that is not on the main DC Earth, and how you just read it. You weren't confused by it. You just picked it up and said, yeah, it's Earth 2. It's kind of going on now. There is an Earth 2 book, that's going to be canceled soon. But so, that's kind of unique. I think that's cool. We're used to having books set in Wild West, set in the future, set in, sword and sorcery times. Well, here's a whole other one on another Earth. And I've just... over the past 2 years have been going through the All-Star Squadron series from issue 1. And it is a tour de force through, like you said, going through Golden Age stories, but mixing in new concepts that could fit right in, and Roy Thomas explaining this and explaining that and connecting this little
weird continuity glitch and making it work. It's just it's great. I mean, the hysterical thing is I'm up to issues like somewhere in the 30s, I think.
Oh, so you're right near the first Freedom Fighter story then.
Past that one. That one's like around 29, 30, 31, 32, somewhere around there. I'm in the one where they're up against the Marvel family.
Oh.
And actually, sort of after with Amazing Man, and there's like the American.
Oh, the
something.
Real American, right?
The Real
android.
American. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the Monitor appearance.
Oh, there you go. So I'm somewhere around there, and the whole series still has not moved more than 2 months past the Pearl Harbor attack, I think.
Yeah. He had big long-term plans for this series. Roy Thomas did.
Yes, he did. But one of the things, while I'm keeping notes on that series, and I need to get back to it, is that Firebrand is actually a major character in that book for all the reasons that you said. Even though it's Liberty Bell that sort of becomes the new chairperson for the team, the All-Star Squadron book actually really did have a core cast of characters, which Firebrand was one of, and then it got larger and larger, and then it would new characters would come in and out, and then the JSA would take over, blah blah blah.
Yeah, well, but Roy was in kind of a rush for a while there. I think he knew that he only had so many issues left to him to do things with Earth 2 and All-Star Squadron, so he started throwing in more and more stuff, and that's probably why things started to get congested and the cast got bigger and bigger.
Yeah, but Firebrand definitely is a major piece, and at the time, it probably didn't dawn on me that using her in this book made sense in that way. In fact, I think when I was reading it, both All-Star Squadron and this, I probably did not know that she wasn't a Golden Age character, just like you said, that she was specifically created, for the series. I didn't know that, I just assumed. Very much like Commander Steel or, I don't know.
Amazing Man.
Amazing. Well, that one you could sort of get the feel for, but yeah, those characters. I guess even Freedom Fighters to a degree, right?
Well, yeah, there was no Golden Age team called the Freedom Fighters. They were all legit Golden Age characters, but they had never come together as a team during the Golden Age.
Right. So it was kind of fun when that bit of knowledge finally does come out, But at this time, reading Crisis back in 80, whatever, I definitely was like, just okay, there she is. Yeah, I get it. One of the other reasons why I think could potentially be a reason why she was chosen, and it only really starts to make sense when you see who else is in the grouping, is there is kind of a elemental thing going on. We have one character, Dawnstar, if you want to look at Dawnstar being about air. You could have Firebrand being about fire, and eventually Killer Frost, if you want to think of like water or ice or something like that. I think that this is in no way does this have any evidence, but it's kind of fun to sort of think, all right, we're covering a lot of the base superhero power tropes of elemental stuff and mind stuff, and you'll see, as we get through it. I think there could be something to that as well. If that I don't think Wolfman is talking about, but as a reader, I'm going through and pointing it out.
Yeah, I agree. It is fun to do that.
Yeah,
because when we get down to the scenes where these characters are actually going into action and being used, it's. I don't think they're running up against situations that their powers are specifically tailored to solving. They're all just kind of pitching into the melee.
Yeah.
So if there was any particular logic of that kind, they're being chosen for these missions. It's not really evident when you get down to reading them.
Yeah.
Doing what the Monitor chose them to do.
Yeah. The only other note I have is that the Firebrand character might be a little more open-minded than, say, a Liberty Bell or even Hawkman. So I can, again, another sort of speaks to her character of why she was chosen. Someone else might try too hard to bring in the rest of the JSA or doubt or have doubts or want to just go to war right away, whereas Firebrand is a little more delicate, sort of counter to her name, right? Firebrand.
Right, where she's just kind of brash, headstrong, impulsive.
Yeah.
But yeah, she seems to be fairly level-headed and perhaps a person of faith, too. But then again, this is why the Monitor and Lila spent all those months handing out high-tech weaponry to supervillains and gangsters and such, just so they could get a chance to see what the heroes that go up against those villains and gangsters are made of. So perhaps that's when they determined that Firebrand would be more receptive to the summoning than some other members of the group would be. And that's a good point, Peter.
And then, of course, we get our first real look at something. Some kind of adversary.
Yes. A silhouette with a very specific profile. Mm-hmm. Notice that protruding upper brow.
Yeah. All right. Anything else on that sequence?
I don't think so.
Okay. Shall we go on? And go on to the next one?
All right. Another recruit, another Earth.
Yeah, an unspecified Earth this time.
Yes, very interesting to note.
Yeah, and this one has a feel, if you sort of look at the technology and the buildings and the gun, the weapons, it feels present tense. There's a hostage situation going on a roof, and springing down from the heavens, the villains turn around and they recognize the person, and it's the Blue Beetle. And he says, in a very sort of metatextual way, isn't recognition grand? Considering this is his first appearance outside of the cover in a... Well, no. Did Husu come out already? I don't remember if Husu number 3 was out.
Okay.
Oh, wait, I have it here. Husu 3 came out the month after Crisis 1. So.
Okay, good. So, yeah, this is... Well, I'd always thought of this as his first appearance in a DC comic, so...
Yeah.
Glad Who's Who, of all things, isn't giving us the lie on that.
So he comes down and he lays the smack down in a very Spider-Man-esque way. And it's really just a way to introduce, I think, readers to this character. He'll have more of an importance to the series after this first issue. But because the Earth is unnamed at this point, there's almost even... I don't even know if they, in their minds yet, really had an idea of what Earth he was going to be from, because there's dialogue later on that sort of suggests that they did not have that squared away yet.
I had the same thought, Peter.
Yeah. But yet it's another person that Harbinger comes to. She's floating in the air as he's trying to, deal with with one of the hostage takers, and she says, same thing, I'm here, Blue Beetle, and I need you. Blue Beetle, come with me, please. I'm here, Blue Beetle, and I need you. They say Blue Beetle a lot in the sequence so that new DC readers can, oh, right, Blue Beetle, I got it, the alliteration, I got it, I'm square. Your questions will be answered later. Please come with me. And he says, boy, this lady, she takes no for an answer. She doesn't take no for an answer. Why not? It's a lousy night for TV anyway. Wolfman really channeling a lot of his Spider-Man dialogue here, I think, in this, when he used to write Amazing Spider-Man. So we are introduced to Blue Beetle, and he is the fourth character, the first male to be, well, outside of Solivar, but to be taken by Harbinger. I do like the introduction. I really think it is Wolfman saying, okay, we haven't seen this character since, whenever the action heroes of Charlton were out. It's the Blue Beetle. Isn't recognition grand? And here I thought I'd be forgotten after all this time. Well, welcome to the DC Universe, Ted Cord.
Resounding welcome.
Yeah.
All right, so we're introduced to... the first scene we see on this Earth, and I'm glad you pointed out that they didn't go out of their way to say which Earth it's on. Mm-hmm. Doesn't even say that it's not on Earth 2. Doesn't say that they're jumping from one Earth to a different Earth. But it is, as you said, at least pretty clearly set more or less in the present, just based on the design of the guns and the clothes that the terrorists or hostage keepers are wearing. Ted Cord makes a couple of different references to TV, including going home and watching PBS. Bottom of page 17, we get a little cameo from Detective Carp. I had always kind of assumed that he was a part of Blue Beetle's supporting cast back in the Charlton Silver Age, but apparently he was introduced in Charlton Portfolio, which is one of a couple of different Charlton fiction fanzine type things that were going on during the years when Charlton was defunct and their action heroes were out of print. So this was not Detective Carp's first appearance, although it certainly was his first appearance in a DC comic, just as it is for Ted Kord.
Right.
And we're introduced to the Bug, too.
Yes.
Beetle actually says, "Bug, lower me a bit." I don't know if he's doing that because the Bug responds to vocal commands, or if Mark Wolfman just wanted to let the readers know that that's the name of the insect-shaped hovercraft that the Beetle uses.
Certainly, I know there's a lot of fans of Blue Beetle from the Justice League Bwahaha era. Not that I'm the biggest Blue Beetle fan, but certainly you can't go through reading this issue, at least, in sort of my experience with this issue and my experience with DC Comics at the point, being maybe a reader of DC Comics for the past, 4 years, since, or 3 or 4 years or whatever. It certainly puts him on the radar, though. And, to go from Crisis to his series, his Len Wein, Paul Cullen's Paris Cullen's.
Yeah.
Thank you, yeah. Which was so good and so popular and so much fun. And then, of course, Legends and then Justice League. This was it. For those of us reading at this time, this was, oh, wow, look at this character. If we didn't have prior knowledge, I should say. For those, the reason I keep referencing Crisis Kid is not so much of, not really necessarily even like long-time readers, but those of us with just enough knowledge of DC Universe and comics to sort of be okay with the craziness of Crisis and having it totally obliterate what we knew because we hadn't invested not even a decade yet, not even 5 years if you want to look at it, so I certainly didn't know who Blue Beetle was, and this was a fun introduction.
Yeah, the image that always stuck with me, and this is from the perspective of someone who is a post-Crisis kid and didn't start reading comics until the 90s, I remember reading this issue of Crisis number 1, the afternoon that I first got it. At that comic show out at the Sheraton. And I was struck by the shape of Blue Beetle's goggles because I'd seen a few images of the Blue Beetle. I may even have read a couple of stories with him in them. But they were published later when he had gotten those sort of convex circular lenses in the goggles in his mask. Mm-hmm. Here we've got the triangular flat lenses. There's that neat panel at the top of page 19 where he's seeing Harbinger and her face is reflected in them. It just kind of looked just strikingly old-fashioned to me, I guess. But then again, this is pre-Crisis Blue Beetle.
Right. Any thoughts on why Blue Beetle?
Oh, as opposed to like Captain Atom, or
yeah, I think that. Yeah, or whatever you're thinking of, why this character.
No, just a fun, rough and tumble. Well, you've already said that Wolfman is comfortable writing this kind of character because he's written Spider-Man. And he's kind of he's a good character for reader ID, I guess you could say. He like Spider-Man himself. He's very intelligent. He's scientifically gifted, but he's still kind of an everyman and used to the idea of the sensation of being out of his depth. So you can see how Wolfman would think that would be appealing to readers, to have someone who's a little confused by what's going on, who's used to just brawling in an alley and fighting, just criminal gunmen like the ones he's going up against in this sequence, and throwing him into the middle of this big cosmic conflagration. It's a good POV thing, something that whose point of view the reader could identify with, and Wolfman too, and he might be able to inject some humor into the proceedings too.
Right,
Kord was always good at that.
And I would think someone like Wolfman, knowing what he does with Titans, having someone like Captain Atom might feel a little too. We're already in a cosmic book, a sort of bigger than life book, so why have Captain Atom in there when you can have someone who's a little bit more of the everyman.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I want to this. I don't know if this is because we're also living in the world of post Watchmen, or I'm trying a little too hard to to find little clues. But I have to say this about this sequence, and also keeping in mind, we just went from a gorilla to a winged, beautiful Pocahontas alien to not your usual Earth 2 representative. Let's just listen to some of his dialogue here. What big guns you boys have. Betcha they make you feel like men. Well, let's do something really manly, like a good old-fashioned fist fight. Here I was all ready for a night out with the guys. I'll go home and watch PBS. No way, handsome. You're not escaping. Was Wolfman was he trying to push a notion of maybe...
He's trying to queer the Blue Beetle. Is that what you're saying?
Maybe for diversity and just, I don't know. No, I'm pretty sure it's not what his intention was, but I just thought that was interesting. And the reason why I say sort of, post-Watchmen is because, this whole psychological notion of people putting up fancy costumes to go out and beat up men. That was one of the characters in Watchmen. Or,
sort of a homoerotic fetish.
Yeah, I just thought it was interesting, but it is something that is very Spider-Man-like. I know that he has done that all the time. Or even if you want to go even crazier than that, it's something very Bugs Bunny-esque.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah,
and you know how much time Bugs Bunny spent in a dress.
Yeah. So I just made a point of it because it hit me upon reading it this time. They just sort of stuck out, and I went, "Wait a minute, am I really seeing this?" Okay, now it is what it is.
Yeah, interesting point to consider. But I think I agree with you, Peter, that you're digging a little too deeply.
Oh, absolutely. I know. I don't want anybody sort of getting like, "Oh, what do you say?" No. I'm just. It's these little things you just when you pull the book away and you kind of go, "Oh." Okay.
Fun stuff to think about.
Yeah.
And like you said, Wolfman's trying to pull together as diverse a group as he can.
Yeah. I guess we can dig in do you want to go to the next one, or it's only half a page though?
Yeah, so we jump to one location briefly, then we jump someplace else, and then we jump back to that location.
Yeah, well, why don't you do, because you're a Psycho Pirate fan, so I think you should.
Well, I'll cover the half page with, we're trying to do this in order. So I'll cover the half page where Harbinger goes back 45,000 years ago, when the world was young, though hardly innocent. She's thinking to herself, where is Arion? So we know exactly which character she's come back to acquire. The Monitor will be furious if I cannot find him in time. Although one wonders how relevant the concept of finding something in time is to someone who can travel through time, What kind of clock is she up against if she can just, zip back to Monitor's satellite 2 seconds after she left? Anyway, she's zipping along. She's in the antediluvian Atlantis, approximately. She's flying through glaciers and ice flows, and she's worrying to herself that she's going to be late for a very important date, and she'll have no excuse for her failure if she doesn't find Arion in time. And then a flying, shadowy shape appears behind her. It appears to be wearing a cape. She doesn't realize that she's being observed until it's too late. Quote, and when she at last realizes her plight, "What? No, not you!" And the shadow zips into her body, and afterwards she just keeps on flying as usual. But then we get an extreme close-up of her face at the bottom of page 19 there on the right-hand side. Her eyes have been completely blacked out, which shows us that the shadowy shape with the cape has apparently possessed her.
Right. She's also pale, and her headgear is now yellow. But that's just because my printing process is effed up in this page.
Wow. Yeah, her headgear doesn't look yellow to me.
Oh yeah, this whole page, the two-thirds of the page from the edge into the closer to the middle of this page 19, everybody's skin tone is almost the same page color as the page itself.
Okay, well, I can see the skin tone being a little yellow, but her helmet, her headdress, whatever you want to call it, that's, in my copy, it's pretty clearly red.
Oh, wow.
But, yeah, this is the vagaries of the coloring processes of the 80s. No, speaking of which, the second panel in from the left on the bottom there, when Harbinger is possessed by the shadowy shape, which she apparently recognizes, that is done in a process that we now know, thanks to listener Brian Philbin, is known as flexography, the flexographic process. He chimed in on the Crisis Tapes Talkback thread to give us some extensive notes about it, and for which we thank him profusely. I'm going to quote them now, actually. On the flexographic process, a few notes. I was in college. Well, this is Brian talking here. I was in college when this came out and had been a comics enthusiast for 15 years at this point and reading for 19. I was so looking forward to this issue, and the flexographic nearly killed the enjoyment for me when I got the first issue home from the comic shop. Anyway, Crisis was not the first title to use this process. That dubious distinction belonged to Spanner's Galaxy, which came out a few months before. To clarify, the process itself was called flexographic, but the paper it was printed on was Mando paper. No reflective sheen to it, which was a step below Baxter, which is what covers were, and essentially most current comics are. Flexographic referred to the printing plates, which were of a rubbery type of material instead of the traditional aluminum. They wore out quickly, too. Not something you really want when you're pressing hundreds of thousands of copies. DC hailed it as the next step in comics technology, and there was a considerable amount of fanfare surrounding it before a single issue printed by it has appeared on the rack. The process used a water-based ink rather than oil-based. Truly, it brought brighter, more vivid colors to the product, but the result wasn't nearly as spectacular as it had been in the test runs. Further on in the print run, water-based ink also stopped sticking as well as the oil-based. In conjunction with the wear of the plates, well, you saw what happened. As you both mentioned, the weakness of separations became far more apparent in this process, particularly registration problems, and sometimes entire objects were missing from the page. Thankfully, DC discarded it shortly after the first issue had been printed.
Yep.
So some comments on 80s coloring there. Thank you very much, Brian Philbin, for that.
I even have a very faint red line going from the top of the page to the bottom of the page on my issue. I don't know why I never replaced this. Like, I knew it was bungled, and I knew that other copies were bungled as well, but I don't know why I didn't just try to, go, I certainly saw Crisis #1 in back issue bins all my life.
Plenty of times, I'm sure.
Yeah, so, I sort of wondered why I never went, let me just get a few other copies. Maybe one of them will have a half-decent printing.
Are you using the same copy you bought, off the rack back in 19?
Same copy. It even has, on the cover, where Superman's cape is, I think a magic marker or something fell on it. So it is the same. These Crisis issues I've had with me since the shelf, and they're still great condition considering how much I've read it. So yeah,
mine's pretty good too, except a lot of visible thumbprints. Yeah, I've cradled this in my sweaty little hands many times.
Right.
I
guess we'll talk about Arion when we actually get to him. So
yeah, Arion, maybe a little more about what happened to Harbinger too. But yeah, let's move on then to page 20.
Okay.
A little caption tells us that we're back on Earth 2 in the present, not in 1942 this time, but in 1984-85. Harbinger is speaking. He is in here, Firebrand, confined to that institution. His powers have driven him quite mad. Stay behind. It is best if I secure him alone. And then we go into an interior shot of a lone figure, straitjacketed, crammed himself into a corner of a high-ceilinged, padded room. And he's muttering to himself, "Crazy? You're crazy to say I am. I'm as sane as any man. But you know what all those emotions did to me? They gave me headaches. I guess I wasn't as good as Halstead was." And then Harbinger shows up in the bottom of that panel, all the way to the right-hand side of the top row of page 20, and she addresses him by name, Roger Hayden. The Psycho-Pirate's powers are needed to help save the universe. And Roger Hayden, the second Psycho-Pirate, tries to blow Harbinger off, insisting that she'd be better served trying to find Halstead, namely Charlie Halstead, who was the original Psycho-Pirate. claiming that he was, quote, better than me. So Haydn thinks that Halstead was a better psychopirate than he had been. He knew how to handle all those emotions. And calmly, Harbinger tells him that Halstead is dead and that it is he that she wants. Haydn insists that he just wants to be left alone, but then Harbinger, her little gem or lodestone or whatever that is on her brow flares and glows, and she's using her powers to calm him or something, but that Haydn remains recalcitrant, does not want to come along, doesn't want to have those headaches, the pains that his powers had given him. He whines that she doesn't know what it's like, how the psychic backlash that he gets from manipulating other people's emotions using his magical Medusa mask. And then Harbinger produces said Medusa mask. And then in a neat little sequence of panels at the top of page 21, Harbinger telekinetically places the mask on his face, tells him that they have one last visit where his powers will come in handy. Apparently she needs the psychopirate's powers to aid in the recruitment of this last acquisition. And the mask goes on Haydn's face. He finally stops whining. Flash of light. And Harbinger, Psychopirate, and apparently Firebrand too, even though Firebrand herself doesn't physically appear anywhere in this little 2-page ditty. She has to be along because Harbinger was talking to her, and they're all gone. And we'll see where they went a couple of pages hence. Yeah. So now we have got a resident of modern-day Earth 2 coming along for the ride.
And a villain.
Yes, true. The first of that ethical orientation that we've encountered so far. Mm-hmm. All right.
Interesting you say Haydn. I was always pronouncing it as Roger Hayden.
Well, comics aren't audio, so I guess we can hear it however we want. But I've always pronounced it like the composer, I suppose.
Oh, is that the same spelling?
I think the composer Haydn omits the E. It's Haydn. But yeah, I say Haydn. But you say Haydn, you say Hayden, I say Haydn. Let's call the whole thing off.
Well, go ahead. You like Psychopirate. What do you have on this?
Okay.
Stuff as well.
I don't have many thesis readings lined up for this episode, but I do have one for Psychopirate. Okay. Originally a petty criminal who gained the power to control emotions from a magic mask, the man who became the Psychopirate donned a red and black harlequin suit and embarked on a life of supercrime until his powers began to overwhelm him and drive him insane. In Crisis on Infinite Earths, he is a figure of abjection, appearing alternately as a tormented addict, a megalomaniacal psychic vampire, and a sniveling, toadying coward. The Psychopirate's importance to Crisis on Infinite Earths cannot be overstated. Indeed, 20 years later, he is now remembered as a living symbol of the Crisis series and the manifold changes it brought about. Mythologically speaking, and here's where I dip into my undergraduate thesis research, he is a trickster figure, an archetypal stock character in myths who represents liminality, marginality, disorder, transgression, and the revelation of unpleasant truths. According to Harold Schechter, one of the writers who I quote in the thesis here, the trickster is a being who is happiest when he is creating chaos, disturbing the peace, and who symbolizes primitive instinctual forces, e.g. emotions, with great potential for destruction. Often, tricksters act as demiurges, playful innovators and bricoleurs with the godlike power to shape reality and to facilitate the formation and or destruction of worlds. Examples can be found in many Native American folklore traditions and in the Norse god Loki, who played a major role in the apocalyptic saga of Ragnarok. The Psychopirate has always been a liminal figure in that he is a link between eras, having first appeared in the Silver Age of comics as a new villain to fight old, recently resurrected superhero characters from the Golden Age. Since Crisis on Infinite Earths is also a liminal phenomenon designed to facilitate a historical transition, the use of the similarly liminal Psychopirate as an iconic character in the Crisis text is appropriate. As a trickster demiurge, he shapes the subjective reality of people's emotions, tricking them into feeling what he wants them to feel, a skill he employs to sow global chaos for the Anti-Monitor. However, since his power depends on his modeling emotions on his own face before he can inflict them on others, and since using his power subjects him to a painful psychic backlash, he must always be the first victim of his own tricks. The psycho-pirate is a personification of the emotional cost of wars and disasters. The text repeatedly goes out of its way to portray the emotional responses of the everyday residents of the DC universe and to show the hero characters in unfamiliar attitudes of fear, grief, doubt, despair, and desperate hope. All emotions that the heroes rarely experienced within the generic security of the old oniric climate, which is a whole different concept. Umberto Eco came up with that idea to explain the seeming cyclicality and self-repetitiveness of the superhero story formula. He was basing that on a bunch of old Superman comics that he'd read. And so you could generalize the oniric climate. It was just like stagnation, basically. It was the idea that DC Comics followed a certain narrative formula, and all of its characters were stuck in a rut, a nice, safe, predictable rut. And Crisis was meant to jar the characters and their universe out of that. And so the events of the Crisis triggered emotions in them that they had forgotten they were able to have. Emotion is one of the main themes of Crisis on Infinite Earths. The devastation in the story is framed as a state of mind as much as a physical occurrence. In the words of the Monitor, in an issue after issue 1, of course, the menace we deal with is one of emotion. And the series itself was conceived in anticipation of the emotions of DC fans, serving as an expressive catharsis and a meaningful transition for them. And the character of the psycho-pirate is crucial to the expression of that theme. So there we are. Those are the thoughts that I had in the thesis about Psycho-Pirate. And the little bit we see of him in this first issue doesn't really bear that out in and of itself. But
yeah, it's the long game on this one. Because I'm glad you read that. Because I have here in my notes, I said, okay, so Psycho-Pirate is basically going to be, and I chose this word, but it's not right. I said, is it the patsy? What is he? I said, it's got to be another word for the character that is torn between all sides, is not really truly responsible for some of his actions, and yet is mostly responsible for others. And he's used, he's abused, and then is the character that suffers the most because of it by the end. All of those questions basically just summed up in everything you just said. I like that notion of the trickster. There's a lot of characters like this in a lot of literature of like, he's not the main villain. He's the main villain's sidekick or henchman or main henchman. And usually something always bad happens to that character. He's the one that you sort of treat, he's sort of foppish in a way. You kind of don't think he's a necessary evil or powerful, but yet he always tends to do something that turns the story for whether it was intentional or not, And I think you're obviously from this first issue, we don't know that that's what's going to happen, but we eventually get that sort of notion.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So that was great. That was great that you read that.
Thank you.
Yeah. A couple things here I like. Visually, talk about some Perez stuff. Harbinger zooming in is very reminiscent to the back cover of those lines. The line zooming away from her, and then this one zooming to her.
I took the words out of my mouth.
Yeah. I also like her physicality. She's not showing a lot of power here, except for that one panel. She's actually kind of very human in the way that she looks at the Psycho-Pirate on that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6th panel there, or the way she bends down to touch him and comfort him, and her hand on his back. It's an interesting new sort of personality to this character. Being able to read, it almost is like is the Harbinger personalities showing up in a manner that they need to present themselves to that character because of how they are.
Right. Just tailoring their demeanor and their behavior toward each target.
Yeah.
Like with Dawnstar, she just skips all the formalities and just reaches right out of a wall and grabs her. Takes a direct approach.
And plays to her powers, right? Like just by being a light, like having to have Dawnstar track her, chase her, which I think is kind of interesting.
Yeah.
You could almost even look at the way she shows up to Solivar just by going through a wall, which is something that, I know you said that they have like some kind of force field. Like, would they bang into the force field? Do they walk through it? I don't know. That's kind of reaching, but Yeah, there's something to be said about the way she approaches all these characters. It's really interesting. And you mentioned the visual on the top of page 21, the floating Medusa mask as it transitions sequentially to Hayden's face is so much fun. Perez is, come on, it's Perez. Although there's something also kind of unique, interesting about it going past Harbinger and like splitting Harbinger's face and very focused on her eyes, and she has very cat-like eyes, and then the mask having no eyes, no features. But yeah, I like that sequence a lot.
Yeah, it's almost Kubrickian, don't you think?
Yeah. Who do you think Roger's talking to?
Really hadn't. He could be aware of the Harbinger's coming, I suppose. I'd always just kind of assumed that he was talking to himself.
Yeah, I have no answer. I just wondered if you did. I think it's, Is this the first time we're seeing him like this, or is this a usual status quo for him, that he's always in a psych ward somewhere?
I think he was driven insane in his last appearance prior to this. I seem to recall he had a run-in with Infinity Inc. Oh, no, wait, no, I'm looking at my Crisis Index now. It says here he was last seen in All-Star Squadron Annual number 2. So yeah, he was not always insane. No, and he'd been a member of the Ultra Humanites version of the Secret Society of Supervillains.
Right. That All-Star Annual 2 does feature the Infinity Inc. That's the end of that slot.
Okay. So I did not remember wrong in that case. So he was not always caused such pain by the use of his powers. I might mention in passing here that a point I made in a footnote to my thesis, a footnote to that passage of text I read, was that arguably the Psycho Pirate could be considered the first new Earth 2 character introduced in the Silver Age. I think to that point, all we'd seen were characters who had actually appeared in Golden Age comics, and those were considered the official denizens, the citizenry of Earth 2. But here we have a new character, albeit a new character, assuming a mantle passed on from an existing Golden Age character. That's the Halstead he's talking about. Charlie Halstead, who had been a newspaper employee who adopted the identity of the Psycho Pirate to get revenge on his boss. And he just committed crimes that were emotion-themed. I don't think he ever actually had any powers to speak of. But then, in that issue of Showcase, teaming up Our Man and Dr. Fate, that was Psycho Pirate's first appearance. I think it was number 65? I should look at the actual footnote I'm talking about here. Psycho Pirate...
Showcase 56.
56, okay. Which was published in 1965. Okay, yeah, I found it. Yep. He has the distinction of being one of the first new characters to be explicitly identified as a native of Earth 2. So there you go. He's kind of like a link to the past, a bridge between past and present.
Interesting.
Yep. So that's so I guess this Halstead guy, the original Psycho Pirate, he fought the JSA a couple of times, not just the once, but then. He passed on knowledge of this group of magic masks, and originally there was more than one mask, and then Hayden went ahead and combined them all into a single mask. But it was Halstead that let him know about their existence, and then Hayden took the ball from there and gained his emotion-controlling powers and used them to fight Our Man and Dr. Fate back there in 1965, and now here he is. Still has those powers, but he doesn't have the sanity that allowed him to make effective use of them. Because he hates the pain that these emotions give him, but he's also kind of an addictive personality, and as you'll see here, he's kind of seen as a figure of pathos in his first appearance in the Crisis series, but he very quickly develops a taste for it, and he becomes kind of like the psychic vampire Psycho Pirate. He starts playing with people's emotions. He gets kind of a high off of it, and he doesn't want to stop.
I enjoyed what you said about the emotional aspect of this event, and for those people who don't know, we lose the Psycho Pirate in Infinite Crisis, the sort of thematic sequel to this. And it would have been really interesting to have a Psycho Pirate within a post emotional spectrum DC universe, with the whole Jeff Johns Rainbow Lanterns. I would have loved to see what that meant and how he would have been involved in. And I think he was, right, like as a Black Lantern. I do think he did show up a couple times here and there.
Yes, I'm sure that he did. Johns would have been able to leave that alone.
Yeah.
And if he brought back like people like Earth 2 Superman and Harbinger and such, then there's no way he would have been able to resist bringing in a Black Lantern Psycho Pirate.
Yeah. And just to see visually how that would have been translated now, with his Medusa mask and emotions, and now we have a rainbow spectrum, and that would have been really cool. So we'll chalk that up to just a lost opportunity. But
yeah. Thing is, though, after Crisis, Psycho Pirate became less that guy who manipulates emotions and more that Crisis guy.
Yeah.
Like I said, he's in my little thesis passage there. He's like the living embodiment of the Crisis now. That's what he symbolizes. He symbolizes the forbidden lore of Crisis. The awful trick that was played on all of DC Comics reality and the people who've been following it.
There's that great Brian Bolland cover from Animal Man, from Morrison's Animal Man run, where literally comics are pouring out of his eyes.
Oh, yeah. I know just the image you mean.
Yeah, I love that.
One of them is that issue of Showcase, I believe.
Oh, there you go. So he says she says Halstead is dead, and there is kind of a Crisis, not equation, but there is a formula to who the Monitor can and can't pick and choose, and I'm fairly certain this is 100% across the board, but maybe there might be one or two exceptions, that if a character is dead in DC Comics publishing history, chronology, then they do not show up. So even though Batman of Earth 2 is seen in the title All-Star Squadron, even as recently as right before when this issue came out, because he was technically dead in publishing continuity, when he was killed off in whatever issue that was. I can't remember. Brave and the Bold, was it? I think so. Or somewhere around there. He was... I have to just assume that Wolfman said, no, we're not going to use that character. He's dead. Like, who else would be a good example of something like that? I'm sure there's other ones. I'm trying to think of who else would have been dead by this point. Mr. Terrific, possibly? Do we see? I don't think we ever really see like Mr. Terrific in this. Even in like flashback tales, I don't think. Like if they ever go back to like an Earth 2 of the past.
We don't see Earth 2 Batman either, for that matter. Right.
We only see him on a monitor when he actually would have been alive in a I think it's like another couple issues or something like that, where she's explaining, maybe it's in issue 7, where Harbinger is going through like Monitor's life, and he is kind of in the DC universe at that time when that Batman would have been alive. So he's sort of on the path. He's I think that happened. I'd have to look at that again. But and I also know that Wolfman was very keen on not killing off characters that were created before he was born.
I do remember that.
Yeah. So that whole idea about, get Halstead. Yeah, technically Harbinger could go and get Halstead, but that's not the game that Wolfman wants to play. He doesn't want to just all of a sudden start pulling in dead characters that we have been known to have died. It's not like he's going to go pull out, I don't know, Crimson Avenger or, just trying to think of other characters that would. At this point, I guess there aren't many Earth 1 characters that are dead, or like Iris West, for lack of a better argument.
There aren't that many DC characters that are dead. Hell, if you think about it, there probably more characters died in Crisis on Infinite Earths than had died in all the 50 years leading up to it.
So, that was my little note about that section. You want to finish out the Arion stuff?
Okay, we'll give it a shot. So we go back to 45,000 years ago. Note briefly here that it doesn't tell us on what Earth, just 45,000 years ago. And then there's a couple of text captions here describing to us the fact that we are in Atlantis, but in the middle of an ice age. And then we see the character that Harbinger has come back in time to retrieve. Arion, High Mage, and Lord of Atlantis. I believe that was the subtitle of his series at that time. Arion, Lord of Atlantis.
Yep.
Eventually, Arion the Immortal. And he's musing to himself that he feels energy abounding. He's getting stronger because of its mounting presence. He gestures and creates that funny little star mosaic image that always forms around his hand whenever he uses his sorcery. And he just creates a little ice bridge across a nearby chasm to demonstrate to himself that he's gotten stronger because of this energy flux. He crosses the bridge. He's musing to himself about how ironic it is that he's trying to save Atlantis from this ice age, yet he feels drawn to the ice all the same because he finds it somehow comforting. And
like a fortress of solitude.
To coin a phrase. Just think, it's 45,000 years ago. You'll be able to sue him. Yeah, a little Mel Brooks for you tonight, folks.
Yeah.
Okay, then Harbinger shows up, and this is Dark Harbinger. Being reminded here that she's been possessed by something. Her eyeballs are now black. And Arion asks her if she's a sorceress, and she simply says to him, Arion, Lord of Atlantis, your power is needed. Come with me. Being commanding. Not wheedling, not enticing, not entreating. She's just saying, come with me. And then, not even waiting for a reply, she attacks him. She shatters the ice bridge out from under him, and he yells as he's falling down into the chasm, and I cannot conjure a spell of levitation. No time to conjure a spell, only time to talk about it. And he falls down into the chasm, but Harbinger zips down, quote, cruel lips curled in delight, but still the sorcerer must not die, at least not yet, not until he demands it. At the last possible moment, Harbinger reacts, and the two vanish. So, cruel cat and mouse Harbinger here, possessed by some dark force, that shadowy thing that insinuated itself upon her a couple of pages ago, back on page 19.
Yeah.
And as we've mentioned, that shadowy thing apparently was familiar to her, or at least appeared familiar to her.
Right, because she says, no, not you, which obviously then the reader should think, well, then who? Who is she talking about? And then she says, not until he demands it. So once again, it's like, okay, nothing has really been dropped yet. I don't believe, maybe Monitor has said something about his enemy, but nothing, substantial.
Yep. I think the only other hint we've had is that thing I mentioned in the last episode when the black mist creeps in, as if with a mind of its own. After each Earth is consumed. Yeah, that's the only real intimation I think we've had up until now that there is some definite malign intelligence at work here, that there is a definite enemy.
Yeah. Certainly DC at this point was well into publishing a broad spectrum of genres, as we mentioned, there's Sergeant Rock was out at this point still. I think Blackhawks had just maybe wrapped up maybe a year or so before this. They might have gone out of maybe some of the mystery in space or some of the horror stuff might have gone out, but there still was Arik, Son of Thunder, and Arion, Lord of Atlantis. Those two titles were definitely still going on. Or if they weren't, they were soon to be canceled, or just being canceled. So using Arion again to cross the breadth and the width and the breadth of their characters is a nice selection. And in terms of magic, if you don't want another Justice Leaguer in there with Zatanna, I guess you got to go with Arion.
Yeah. Well, there are a bunch of different magic users they could have chosen between, but for the reasons you've already said, Peter, I think Arion was a very good choice.
Yeah.
Not only a magic wielder, but a DC historical character, like a sword and sorcery genre character. ties to the realm of ancient Atlantis. So that covers that base. They don't have to bring in an Aquaman family member.
Right. The dialogue is interesting, or the narration. Someday soon, a great hero will stem the frozen tide. Someday, but not this day. He is Arion, High Mage and Lord of Atlantis. So, at first I was a little confused. I thought they were talking about someone else, but then when you read it connected, it obviously I guess they're assumed that they're talking about Arion. A great hero will stem the frozen tide, but not today. It's like, well, is he not a great hero now? No. Okay. All right.
No, he's just not stemming the frozen tide today.
Yeah.
Today he's pondering.
And I do like the mastodon. Is that what it is? Yeah, frozen in the encroaching ice. Little detail there by Perez.
Yeah. Little, establishing shot, I guess, over the shoulder.
Yeah.
Tells you that we're far enough into the ice age that all those critters have already been put on ice.
And if Solivar is science, then we now have our magic guy. So it's a nice little duality going on there. And that's all I had for that sequence.
All right. Okay, and before we get into the Firestorm and Killer Frost sequence beginning on page 23, let me just look at that caption at the top of page 23. Earth 1, the present. So now we're specifically on Earth 1, but when we went from Roger Hayden's padded cell to 45,000 years ago Atlantis, no mention was made as to what Earth we were suddenly on when possessed Harbinger went to confront Arion. So, on what Earth is Arion's Atlantis? In which universe's timeline were Arion's adventures supposed to take place? And I find myself wondering, and this is, again, just a wild speculation here, stabbing in the dark, but had they already begun to think about what to do with Power Girl at this point? Because I think it was because of Paul Kupperberg specifically that Power Girl was saved from oblivion. The Earth 2 Superman wasn't allowed to exist anymore. No one was allowed to remember him, but somehow his cousin found a place in the New World Order. And they did that by just snipping off her connection to Krypton and grafting on a connection to Arion's Atlantis. So I'm wondering, are they very subtly suggesting that perhaps Arion's Atlantis is part of Earth 2's history, and that maybe the eventual reveal that Power Girl is Arion's granddaughter and a resident of ancient Atlantis sent into the future, as opposed to being rocketed from the dying planet of Krypton 2 to Earth 2? I mean, is she are we seeing groundwork being laid here that she was never really a Kryptonian, but she was a resident of ancient Earth 2?
Yeah, I think it's a little too early for that, probably.
You're probably right.
Certainly, I do like that speculation because it is something that DC does do with her character. Right, yeah, it totally makes sense. The only connection I could sort of say to enforce that Arion is... well, there's a couple thoughts here. First off, structurally... Gorilla City doesn't get a listing of Earth 1 or Earth 2, and neither does Legion of Superheroes. That sequence, we just get the 30th century and we just get Gorilla City. So the only time we get the Earth delineation is with, do we even get it with Firebrand? Oh, yeah, on Earth 2, yeah.
Yeah, we definitely do with Firebrand. And we do with Firestorm here on the next page.
And Firestorm and with Psycho Pirate. So it's not totally universal through all those that they're delineating where. So, but we clearly know as readers, Gorilla City is Earth 1, Legion is Earth 1.
Arion, because his adventures are set in the distant past, it's a little less clear.
Right. Well, the only thing I can say to that is I used to read Arion, actually. I actually always meant to collect the entire series. I don't know if this is something that happens later, but the whole there's a slight connection between some of the stuff that goes on in Arion and Warlord. It's sort of minor. And Warlord is definitely an Earth One concept because he has met certain characters, DC characters, prior to the Crisis. I think I have to maybe not. Maybe that is something that with Dan Jurgens it sort of came about, which would put it right around this time.
Yeah, I was almost sure that Travis Morgan had met a couple of Earth One characters.
Okay. There's also the only other, and I don't know if this is before or after Crisis, but Arion appeared in DC Comics Presents, which is not a, that's not like 100% proof that it's Earth One, but
true.
It's normally they would delineate what Earth or where they were coming from. So, but again, I don't remember if that was before or after Crisis One.
I'm almost positive it was before.
Okay. I always took Arion to be an Earth One concept, and then obviously with the whole that Aquaman miniseries right around this time, I think it was 86. Again, that is after, but where it was a 4-issue miniseries where he gets the tragic camouflage suit, which I always liked. That
that blue one with the
yeah,
like the wave simulating runners. Yeah, they're like the underwater camera. Yeah.
Right, yeah, I always loved that one. Craig Hamilton, I think, was not Craig Hamilton, Neil Posner, I forget who created it. Anyway, there was very strong connections even this is prior to the Atlantis Chronicles that Peter David would write, between Aquaman and Arion, even to the point of saying that when it comes to Atlantis, there will always be two brothers who are at war. And that is something that is a concept with Arion, is that he and his brother are Garn Danuth or whatever his name is.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, they're always going at it, and so is Aquaman and Ocean Master. And so even prior to, in fact, that 4-issue miniseries actually is some of that stuff Peter David mines for Atlantis Chronicles and definitely for his Aquaman run. So... yes, that is still, that's post-Crisis, shortly, after 1986. But I always feel that Arion is an Earth One type character or history. Yeah. So maybe that's enough not evidence possibly to sway you to that thinking.
I have no difficulty believing that Arion is on Earth One. It wasn't until I saw the fact that they went out of their way to they bothered to tell us we were back on Earth One for the Firestorm scene. And until I saw that, it never even crossed my mind that Arion was anything but an Earth One character.
Although there is something very interesting about Earth One being in the present and having the Legion of Superheroes of the future, and Earth 2 being in the past and having Arion all the way back. Like, there's something kind of nice about that symmetry, but yeah. Can I do the Firestorm thing?
No, go right ahead.
Yeah, I was a fan of Firestorm, and this character in this little section here, having a Justice Leaguer, having one of DC's younger characters, very hot-headed character. Also sort of a Spider-Man-esque feel in terms of having a younger character in a title with a lot of supporting cast characters and having to deal with his father and having to deal with high school and all that stuff. So I was a big fan of Firestorm back in this time. So Earth One, the present, he is speeding through a city, which may or may not be New York. I forget where his took place.
He went to college in Pittsburgh, didn't he?
He went to college in Pittsburgh, but I don't remember if he's there just yet. I don't know if it's post or I forget. But he has already been contacted by Harbinger because he is going after one of his main foes in the form of Killer Frost. And if you're watching the Flash TV series right now, these two characters will have a lot of resonance in I would assume by the end of the season or next season. So there he says, there she is, Killer Frost, my dangerous enemy. And he talks out loud. which is a storytelling conceit, but also can work for the character because within him is the character of Professor Stein.
Mm-hmm.
They share mind and body as a character that is all about fusion and nuclear stuff. So he frees Killer Frost. She doesn't know why, and she is a villain, so she strikes him. She sends a bunch of icicles at him. And he goes, all right, we don't got time for this. Harbinger, where are you? And not only does Harbinger show up, but so does Psycho Pirate in connection to what Harbinger said earlier about making that we need you. We have to do. We need your powers for one visit. Poor Firebrand still not here in this little sequence.
Yeah, what is she in the trunk or something?
So Roger Hayden is back, and he's not only got the mask, he's got his costume, and he says, "You know this will hurt me," and Harbinger says, "No, I trust me. You will feel no pain." And the important mission that he needs to sway over one of his secret society teammates, as you mentioned earlier, to the side of good. And he decides to do it with love of all things, love for your enemy, love for man, love for Earth, because she needs to save the universe, and especially love for your enemy. And she falls head over heels with Firestorm, gives him a pucker on the lips, and he almost freezes. You can see him shivering in the next panel, which is pretty funny. And they said, all right, thanks. It's time for us to leave. And we'll see where they're going in another page. So we got yet another character in here, major character, one major character and his villain. Kind of speaking along that whole like fire and ice thing, you know. I can see using Firestorm for his sheer power, even if it is untapped at this point.
Mm-hmm. Uses it for wacky, Looney Tunes type effects, like turning icicles into flowers.
Yeah. Which I actually wrote a note about because his powers do not affect organic matter, so he can't turn people into things. And I think there was even something where he tried to turn somebody's clothing into something, but it was made of cotton or wool or something, and he couldn't actually affect it. So I thought it was interesting that he turned it into flowers, unless they're like fake flowers, if he can't affect organic, can he actually create organic? And I don't think that's part of his, but I'm not sure.
Well, perhaps they're artificial flowers then.
Yeah, that's what I went with. And not only is he a Justice Leaguer and sort of a flagship, or in DC's publishing roster, it's definitely an important book. But he does have history with George Perez, who drew some of the chapters when Firestorm was a backup tale in Flash, of all titles.
Uh-huh.
So there's a lot of little connections there, which also kind of gives a little bit of support of why Firestorm should be showing up in the Flash TV series. It wasn't. He had a 6-issue series, I think, when he was first introduced, and
yeah, it didn't last very long. It was like 1978, I think.
And he showed up.
Derek Conway.
Mm-hmm. And he showed up in the Justice League as a new member, and then he was a backup in Flash. So it's kind of interesting that he is actually spinning out of the Flash TV series, because there is a little bit of history there. So. Not that TV viewers would know that, and maybe not many comic readers either, but I would. Yeah. It makes sense to me. So, and also it's also interesting that Psycho Pirate, Killer Frost, part of the Secret Society of Supervillains, which was a Justice League storyline that Perez also drew.
That's also true.
Yeah.
It's like number 194 through 197, I think.
I love that. I love that one.
So did I.
Yeah.
Because I love Earth 1, Earth 2 stories, and I love the Secret Society, so put them together, slap Perez art on it.
Good stuff.
Had the Signal Man in it, if I remember correctly.
He's
one of my favorite Batman villains.
Ragdoll.
Yeah. And the monocle.
The monocle. Earth 2.
We hardly knew ye.
Yes. We both said this.
Worlds are colliding.
This is why we do this podcast.
Our vibrational frequencies are slowing down, Peter. We're going to occupy the same space at the same time soon.
Well, we are 2 hours in, so
terrifying. It's true. Almost, like half a minute away from the 2-hour mark.
Yep. All right. Shall we power through?
Let me see here if there's any. If I have any additional notes about this couple of pages. Okay, a psychopirate makes mention. He says, Harbinger, there's something I didn't tell you. As much as it hurts, once I start tampering with emotions, I never want to stop. So there's the addictive angle to his powers that I mentioned earlier. So he's going to start going a little bit loony. So this is the first time he gets to use his emotion-altering powers here. He takes off the Medusa mask, models the emotion he wants his victim, Killer Frost, to feel. I guess that's the look of love he's wearing there. Could just as well be the look of food coma for all. I don't know. And then Killer Frost gets all googie-eyed, and we get this sort of a comedic subplot that goes on in the background for the next couple of issues of her constantly trying to spoon with Firestorm and him not being completely into it. And she says to him at the bottom of page 24, "Don't resist me. We were made for each other," which, on a meta level is true because she was created to be his enemy. So. And the appropriateness of fire and ice, the characters themselves are aware of that. So
that little kiss there is interesting because one of the ways he chooses to defeat her in his book at one point is by kissing her because she absorbs the heat of men, of people. Don't ask me why a creature of ice would do that, but it was something along those lines. So he says, "All right, fine. If you want it, then I'll give you all of it." And he kisses her and radiates incredible amounts of whatever, and she can't take it, and she overloads.
That was. I think we're on the second Killer Frost here, aren't we?
On this one, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because the first one was Crystal Frost, I think, and this is Louise Lincoln, Killer Frost 2.
Oh, is that what you mean? That's a good question because let me see about that. So who was the one that was in the secret society?
I can't answer that. I'm looking at the Crisis Index again, and it is telling me that this is the second Killer Frost that we're seeing.
Yeah, this is Louise Lincoln, and that is the one where that happened. She was, she first appeared in Firestorm 21. That's the storyline I was referencing, where she repeats the experiment of her mentor, and the way that he gets rid of her is that she tries to absorb, and he kisses her or something like that. Like she kisses him and then they freeze and then he tried to overload her. So yeah, that's her, Louise Lincoln. That's who you're saying this is, right?
Right.
Yeah. Okay. I would be able to look it up, but I sold all my Firestorm issues years ago. So
one of many former components of your collection that you miss sometimes, I'm sure.
Yeah. Out in the eBay world. So.
And it's never more than a wild pig sale away,
That's right.
It's a comforting thought.
All right.
All right, now time to power through.
Good.
All right, so then we move on to page 25. The recruitment drive is more or less over. Monitor is musing to himself aboard his satellite. He's saying, "Yes, hurry back, Harbinger, for I fear our mutual enemy may not allow me much time for planning." So that puts it in very explicit terms that there is an adversary here. This is not just some kind of natural disaster. "Already another Earth has perished," the Monitor continues, "and 5 heroes I needed are gone. Thus I've dispatched your replicants to seek out others as replacements, though we the readers will not see those replicants or what they do. Lila, when I first observed this Earth, knowing what was to come, when I found you a half-dead child floating lost at sea, when I saved you, nurtured you, watched you grow into womanhood these past 20 years, when I came to love you like the daughter I never had and never could, little did either of us know that one day you would be my killer. I fear for you, Lila. My life may be forfeit, but you, my dear, you hold in your hands the fate of the cosmos itself. And all of this is told and accompanied with little segmentary panels that show little partial close-ups of different parts of the Monitor's body. We get a couple of shots of his gloved hand, which is what we've been getting in Monitor's cameos in various DC series for the past year. We get an extreme close-up of his nose and eyes. We see him at a distance, his billowing cape behind him as he walks away from us. We see another close-up of his gloved hand. So this page actually looks more like Keith Giffen's work than it does like Perez. It's funny. But yeah, so we're still playing a little coy with the Monitor's physical appearance. We have seen a full body shot of him by now, not in this series, but in one of his cameos in GI Combat, of all places, when sort of a holographic image of the Monitor encounters the ghost of Jeb Stewart as he haunts the haunted tank. And Jeb Stewart is the only character, the ghostly General Jeb Stewart is the only character in that story that is able to see the Monitor, but it's the first time that anybody, readers included, got a good look at what he looks like. But we haven't seen him in color yet. And we don't get that until the very last page of this issue.
But I think it also, if readers are reading it to this detail, I would think they would start picking up the connection to all those shadow beings as well, and sort of going, wait a minute, what's going on here? Why do the shadows look like Monitor? You know, I mean, not only are we don't know who the enemy is, but you know, we're reading this in hindsight, and we sort of know to trust the Monitor. But even this early, should we be trusting him? You know, he's been going through the DC universe, powering up all these villains, and there's been certain sequences where he comes across as a villain. So you know, even though this dialogue certainly speaks to him being, you know,
a benevolent figure,
but yeah, it is interesting to when you say these close-ups of his cape and these gauntlets and his brow even, I mean, that's all the things that we've been seeing with these shadow things. So.
Exactly. All the things he has in common with the Shadow Demon's profile.
Yeah. So it's a nice little connection going on there. So this another Earth has perished and 5 heroes are gone thing. I've seen it make mention on some sites where they allude that to Earth 3. In the next, I'm jumping ahead, but in the next issue, he does mention that the last Earth that was destroyed was Earth 3. Because at this point, I'm sort of reading it going, oh, it's just another Earth that we haven't seen. But then there's dialogue in the next issue that kind of counters that. But why would he be calling them heroes? And
well, because he doesn't draw the same line between heroism and villainy that, maybe the heroes and villains themselves would. He's kind of dismissive of the idea of quote-unquote villain. Yeah, I'm actually with you, Peter. It never really occurred to me that the crime syndicate would be the 5 characters he's talking about. And I don't think that's what Wolfman had in mind either. I think in the next issue when he says, the Earth 3 was the last to die, I think he just kind of forgot. Like he just threw this is kind of a throwaway detail here, that another Earth has perished and 5 heroes I needed are gone. I think maybe he just threw that in here to fire the reader's imagination. Like, gosh and golly, what Earth could that have been? What unknown and now never to be known costumed champions were lost to the paneled page annals for all time? You know, what characters could we have seen here? Maybe there are characters from, I don't know, Standard Nettor or the American Comics Group, some other defunct publisher that DC could have bought but didn't.
Not to mention, he says, I've already dispatched your replicants to seek out other replacements, but we never see those replacements either. You know, I was trying to think, because we've seen 8 characters so far. We know that there's going to be 15 in the big first issue gathering. And, I was like, well, are some of those the ones we haven't seen yet? But I was like, no, that doesn't make sense either. So, yeah, it's there's a lot of bits and pieces of dialogue in a lot of different places that it's sort of the same thing, where it's like if you get too specific with it, it's going to drive you batty. And that'll come up in some of the later issues too. But I just thought that was an interesting little passage.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
We get a little background on the relationship between Lila and Monitor.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think we'd known before this that Lila was a foundling, that Monitor came across her floating after a shipwreck, and that he raised her over a period of 20 years like his own daughter. And then we get back to those formal similarities, faint though they may be, between his outfit and Harbinger's costume.
And that's something that we never really get explained, unless I missed it somewhere. But the lore of Harbinger's origin is always that she is just a half-dead child floating lost at sea. We don't get where she's from. We can assume possibly she's from Earth-1, but we're not sure. But it's always just one sort of image of a young child clutching a piece of debris in water. We don't get it in this issue, but we'll get it in later issue, and we'll get it in some other places too. Which I thought was always interesting. I don't, we never really, that's it. That's all we know about her past, which is cool.
Yeah. And there's some elaboration on that later on, much later on, in the Return of Donna Troy special.
Oh, see, now I'm not remembering that, so I'd have to go back and read that.
Yeah, it's about her and Dark Angel, and I think she was a resident of Earth-7, and she was actually rescued by... I forget if it was the AIM Monitor or maybe it was the Anti-Monitor, but she was rescued from a burning building, taken from fire, whereas Harbinger was taken from water.
Mm. Yeah, because
I'm a little fuzzy on the details too, but there's some kind of connection between Donna Troy / Dark Angel and Harbinger.
Right. Yeah, she was supposed to be like the new Harbinger for Infinite Crisis and all that, or post-Infinite Crisis. Yeah, I guess even because during, was it 52 or Countdown, where Donna Troy actually narrated the history of the DC Universe by Dan Jurgens?
Yeah, that was Countdown.
Okay.
Right, because remember, in 52 it was Secret Origin strips
that's
in the
right.
back of each issue, and then, the history thing was in the back of the pages of Countdown, when we learned that there were multiple monitors, an idea that I've never cottoned to, I must confess.
So if he found her 20 years ago, what was going on in DC Universe in 1965? And say if she was through Earth-1, like does that speak to anything?
When did the Teen Titans first appear?
54? No, I forget.
Oh, definitely not. That's before Barry Allen.
Oh, I'm sorry. No.
Come on, Mr. Titans Tower guy.
Hold on. 64, right? Oh my God, I can't believe I don't remember. Because it's Brave and the Bold 60 in June of 1965. That's what it is. Sorry.
Aha, so there you go. That's something that was going on.
So, okay. Again, it's like when you get a number in there 20 years ago from 1985.
Yeah, but that's 20 years in DC Universe time too.
True.
Tends to be a rather, probably a longer period than it is in real world time.
Yeah. Well, that's all I have for that page.
Oh, and we also get the very important detail that Lila / Harbinger is going to kill the Monitor. Oh, right, yeah. Setting up a very Shakespeare kind of thing, or, it's like he already knows. He already knows what's going on with her and that this is going to happen, so. Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah, well, one of the classes I took at Bowling Green, in grad school, was about women in action-based genres of popular entertainment. Mm-hmm. And I think my professor would have identified Harbinger as a kind of daddy's girl. That's like a stock type of action women. Mm-hmm. That she was raised or was under the rather strict tutelage of this somewhat distant father figure, and in the end she ends up, in spite of herself, striking back at him. In a way, she's under the control. We'll talk about this when the killing actually happens. Yeah. But that makes sense. Yeah. All right, and now we get the first big group shot aboard the Monitor satellite. It's not the biggest group shot aboard the Monitor satellite. The shot I'm thinking of. Oh yeah. A couple of issues later, we'll have a lot of footnoting to do then. Oh boy. But here we are, page 26 and 27. We've got the Monitors team finally assembled.
The Great 15.
Yep. They have been summoned, including several that we don't actually get to see being gathered in by the Harbinger duplicates.
At least not in... We do see some of them in the tie-ins, but not in the crossovers, but not in this issue, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Caption in the upper left says, "Enter now the chamber deep inside the Monitor's satellite, for here have the powers assembled. Here are all those who have thus far been brought from Earths 1 and 2. And directly under that, who's standing right under that caption?
Blue Beetle.
Man, I haven't seen so many costumes since last Halloween, and I bet none of them's ever even heard of the Blue Beetle."
Right, because he's not from Earth 1 or Earth 2. At least what we'll know.
Yep. Sooner or later, we'll all know that for certain. At this point, as you opined earlier, Peter, and I think there's something to what you said, it might be that maybe Wolfman and company hadn't quite made up their minds yet whether he was not from Earth 1 or Earth 2.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe they could get away with just saying, oh, all these Charlton characters have been on Earth 1 all along, and we just never bothered to tell you about it. But then eventually they said, nah, let's just give them their own autonomous universe and then destroy it.
Which makes sense.
So I'm thinking Wolfman was kind of on the fence between those two alternatives at that point, and so just kind of subtly, tactfully slipped this in here saying, that line about how none of them's ever heard of the Blue Beetle, which could be taken a couple of different ways.
Yeah. I mean, if you think about it, Earth 2 seemed to be the one that the dumping ground of all the other characters that were at like Fawcett and Quality and wherever else, that was Earth 2 was like the generic dumping ground. Did any of them go to Earth 1 at all? I don't think any of them did, right? So
any of which?
Any of the characters that were plucked from other publishers. Get any?
Well, the Shadow, while they had the license to him, met Batman, so he had to have been on Earth 1.
Mm-hmm.
Captain Action was probably on Earth 1. But yeah, thinking specifically of, hell, for that matter, Wildcat was on Earth 1 for a little while there. Or maybe Earth... That's one of those situations where they had to invent a
Earth B.
Exactly. B for Brave and the Bold, B for Bob Haney, B for Bollocks.
Yeah.
Had to invent a special narrative functionary Earth in which to plop stories that didn't quite seem to fit in either Earth's continuity.
Right. So that'll be rectified, and that actually is only something I only realized in this reading of it. I never really thought about that before, but it was until I saw that and said Earth 1 and Earth 2, I said, what? No, that's not right. So all those years prior to reading it, that never really dawned on me that was incorrect. Well, at least at this point.
Yeah. Correctness. Correctness is fluid in this series. That's the fluidity of correctness is kind of what this series is all about.
Right.
Changing what's correct.
So then we just it's a panorama view, another sort of double page spread of all the different characters, and all of them with more or less all of them with some kind of dialogue or thoughts. Dawnstar saying, this is a what is it? TARDIS.
Yeah.
TARDIS. Almost a TARDIS. I'm like, it's getting late. Seems so much smaller from the outside, yet inside it stretches on for miles. Solivar questioning. They stare at me. My presence here is uncomforting to them. Unlike us apes, they have not yet learned to look beyond the form to the soul that lives inside. He's very judgmental.
Well, he's on the defensive, his prior encounters with humans, except Barry Allen, have not been very, very pleasant. So he's kind of learned to overreact to the presence of humans, I guess.
Yeah.
Up there
I was going to say, these two characters we've seen in this, so it's kind of nice that they are the ones that lead us into what you're going to say then.
Yep. So they're the guys we know at the party.
Yeah.
And then we meet some new faces. A very small figure up in the background there on an upper landing is, the pink cloak with the... in my copy, you can't make out his facial features at all.
No, not mine either.
And he's thinking to himself, well, the girl warned me, didn't she? Some of my enemies are here. Still, I am Simon, and my psionic powers are virtually without limit, and oh, how I'd enjoy using them if the need arises. There's another villain introduced here.
Mm-hmm. Very dear to Wolfman's heart, since he is a New Teen Titans villain.
He sure is.
Yeah. And with that connection, sort of right below him, we have two characters that we haven't seen that were collected outside of this issue. Geoforce of the Outsiders and Cyborg of the New Teen Titans, who it does make sense that they would be standing next to each other because they have several connections, one of them being that there was a crossover between the two titles. Another one is that they were two very popular titles at the time. And another connection of Geoforce is the brother of a Titans character named Terra, who had just recently passed away in a Teen Titans major Teen Titans story arc, probably the most major New Teen Titans story arc ever.
We talking the Judas Contract?
Judas Contract, yes. And there you go. There's another. That whole thing I was saying about the Monitor not being able to bring about people that were dead. I want to. Was she referenced somewhere?
Well, it didn't happen in this issue, but
no. Or was it a crossover where she says something about what about anyway? So, yeah, and Geoforce, to go to my whole fire, air, water thing, he is definitely of the Earth because his powers are all based on Earth, everything, lava and magnetism, geomagnetism, and anything and everything that has to do with Earth. He said he's very doubtful. Cyborg, do you believe this Harbinger's plea is a real one? If it isn't, well, then she just spent a bundle putting on one heck of a practical joke.
That's Cyborg wit.
Yeah. I have to say, too, the whole using Cyborg as the New Teen Titans character representative, whether you want to speak to diversity or not. He also was in the cartoon around this time as well.
True. Like the Superpowers incarnation of Super Friends.
Yeah, the Galactic Guardians, whatever the hell they called it, I forget. Or was that a different one?
Hey, I think that came right after Super... Yeah, okay, I think you're probably right. Yeah, Galactic Guardians, yeah, because Firestorm was included in the Superpowers team, and I think he was probably still around for Galactic Guardians then.
Yep. So, this whole... just to get on a little soapbox here, people saying that the DC is trying to force Cyborg into a spotlight position. Well, he's actually been that way for a long time. If you, again, as a prominent black character on a superhero cartoon, and then, here in Crisis as well. Isn't he right on the front cover? Yeah, he's sort of on the near the spine of the front cover, but so it's not totally it's not. There isn't lack of precedence to try to make him into a major sort of character. Now, whether people latch onto him, that's a different story. But so that's my little soapbox.
Oh, interesting side note about Simon, by the way. And I'm getting this out of the Crisis Index. Okay, because Simon is brought to the Monitor's satellite by Harbinger in Tales of the Teen Titans number 58, which is actually, as of this point, had not been published yet. That wasn't published until several months later. He is informed at that point that the Crisis on Infinite Earths will begin in 3 months, and he must remain on the satellite during that time and is thus unseen behind the scenes in all subsequent appearances of the Monitor and Lila prior to this issue. So, as per Tales of the Teen Titans number 58, apparently Simon has been hanging around the Monitor satellite for some time. Probably gathering intelligence the whole time. Intelligence that I'm sure he had lots of plans to use, but he didn't get the chance because he got his brains literally blown out in it, which we'll see happen in a later issue.
You want to do fire?
Oh, yeah, sure. Well, we've got this whole little Earth 2 click going on in the middle of the room. Yeah, so, speaking of diversity here, I can break down the characters in the room here. we've got 10 Earth 1 characters. And then we've got 4 from Earth 2 and Ted Core, Blue Beetle kind of on the fence here, possibly representing Earth 4. Later on, we'll learn that he definitely represents Earth 4. But, in the middle of the room, we've got Psycho Pirate just kind of hovering in the middle, probably mildly catatonic, maybe still tingling with the rush of inspiring love in Killer Frost. But in any event, he's not speaking or thinking in this big panel. Instead, we've got Firebrand zipping past, musing to herself that she knows Obsidian, who's standing down there next to Earth 2 Superman. The squadron recently met him and his friends. But Superman looks so old, hardly the Man of Steel I know so well. Well, I guess everybody ages. So we've got the World War II era Danette Riley, the 1940s Earth 2 Firebrand 2, but we've got the 1985 version of Earth 2 Superman, and representing the next generation of Earth 2 heroes, we've got Todd Rice, Obsidian, son of the Earth 2 Green Lantern. Okay. And there's the Earth 2 Superman who's gesturing up at Firebrand and saying, "Firebrand, it's been a while," cut off in mid-sentence as she flies past, not even realizing that he's spoken. And Obsidian makes an excuse for her, saying, "I think she's as stunned at all this as I am." And the fact that Superman doesn't get a chance to finish the sentence, attempting to catch up with Firebrand, because we don't know at this point, I think, what becomes of Firebrand post-war. One assumes that Roy Thomas had some ideas as to what would happen to the Earth 2 characters that he created in All-Star Squadron and what futures he would chart for them in the modern-day Earth 2 that he was depicting in his Infinity Inc. series at the same time. So, and to this day, I'm not really sure what Firebrand's ultimate fate was post-World War II.
Yeah, I'm not sure about that. It certainly makes sense that you would use the more present day Earth 2 Superman, because that is the one that visually is a shorthand to separate him from Earth 1. The Earth 2 modern Superman with the gray temples and older look, like you just
more Art Deco styled S-shield, and depending on who's drawing it, sometimes you get those crinkled sweater cuffs around his sleeves too.
Yeah, Perez definitely does. He draws them. They're there on the cover, front cover.
Yeah. It's good that they went that route too, because you want to represent the Superman legend in some way. You need to have a Superman, but if you put in the Earth 1 Superman, the big gun of big guns, the flagship character of DC, I mean, then he's likely going to dominate all the proceedings here. Mm-hmm. And as I pointed out in my reading from my thesis last episode, DC was at pains not to allow any one character to dominate anything. They're trying to decenter all of this and make it a story about the DC universe as a whole, which is why that they allowed these newly created characters like Pariah, Harbinger, the Monitor, Alex Luthor, and so forth to bear so much of the narrative function.
Right. And if you're going to use Superman of Earth 2, you got to put him in a position where he has knowledge of the multiverse and other Earths, and a young Superman of Earth 2 may not have that as much as an older Superman of Earth 2 would.
Yeah. I think what's defining this Earth 2 Superman and what he brings to the party is precisely age, experience, and the confidence and wisdom that brings.
Yeah. Arion is more about the science of the Monitor ship, which is something that even Atlantis had, but he's saying that it's even greater than Atlantis. But he definitely feels the gnawing of evil. It grows and chokes the air. So his mystical energies are tuned into something. Something's not right, letting the readers know that something's not right just yet.
And down there, sort of between Arion and Obsidian, we've got the Green Lantern Corps' representative in all of this, and this would be John Stewart, who was the acting Green Lantern of Space Sector 2814 as of the mid-'80s. Hal Jordan was in retirement, and, Crisis fun fact from several episodes ago, Hal Jordan really did not make any appearance in the Crisis on Infinite Earths maxi series. Mm-hmm. He showed up in the Crisis crossovers in the Green Lantern series, but he wasn't in Crisis itself.
Right.
Yes, Guy Gardner was wielding a ring for part of the series, but for by and large, it's John Stewart is representing the Corps here, and he's using his ring to scan the satellite around him, and thinking like an architect, he's trying to find the power source for the satellite, and wondering to himself who the Monitor is, and he's acknowledging for the first time in this issue, the ruse that the Monitor had been employing for the past year or several months, however long it is, in DC time versus real time. His pose as an arms dealer, power broker, etc., which was all the time just a sham, just a canard, something he was doing to conceal his true intentions of studying the superhumans of various time periods and worlds to gauge their strengths and weaknesses and determine how best to use them to save, what remains of the multiverse.
Right.
But John Stewart, as far as he knows, he's just some guy who's supplying weapons to criminals. But if he was doing that, Stewart wonders to himself, why did he bring us here? So, good thinking there, John Stewart.
Yeah. I do like that Dr. Polaris is sort of right on the heels of that thought, connecting, if you want to connect Green Lantern, Dr. Polaris, to the Green Lantern mythos and as a villain of Green Lantern. Maybe not necessarily John Stewart just yet, but and whereas everybody's sort of pontificating or not, or they're sort of in self sort of just in awe and looking around and trying to talk to each other in true villain form. I demand to see the Monitor now. Yeah. Dr. Polaris does not like to be kept waiting.
Showing off his ego,
yeah.
Classic villain ego, which is exaggerated, larger than life, but then. Take into account that Dr. Polaris is kind of a split personality case. Understandable that he'd be a little over the top and two-dimensional. He's really only half a personality.
Yeah. And I absolutely love the characterization of Firestorm up there.
Yeah, showing off for his date up there.
Yep, and absolutely he should be the one that would know everybody here as a member of the Justice League and as a youthful character. I know them all. There's Earth 2 Superman. There's Geoforce from Outsiders, talking with Cyborg from the Teen Titans. And the rest, well, hey, quit nibbling on my ear. I like that. And in this sort of notion of why these ones were picked, that was another sort of notch with Firestorm, I kind of was going through it all and picking out some of the more elemental ones again, like Polaris, the whole magnetism thing is something that will come up later, especially if you, not to give it away, but if you think about Flash and how he goes through the worlds and what else is needed. Like there's something interesting about making sure he's there, making sure Geoforce is there. You have Simon and Psychopirate for mental and emotional aspects. I mentioned about Arion and Solovar sort of being a flip-flop of magic and science or like magic and science. And then you have Blue Beetle that's sort of caught in the middle of it, at least. But, at this point, he still has the Scarab, but that's something that'll be tweaked later. And it is mystical, but he's a man of science, so there's something interesting there.
He doesn't even have the Scarab anymore. So we're told. I think, later on we find out that the main reason he was brought in, the main in-story reason he was brought in was because of the Scarab, and that its mystic powers might enable him to dispel the shadow demons. But then he has to cop to the fact that he's lost the Scarab somehow.
Yeah,
doesn't even have that edge anymore.
Cyborg, if you want to think of sort of like tech, I wasn't quite certain, really where he fit in, other than just being, a major character in New Teen Titans, someone that Wolfman obviously had very strong feelings for, and he has several connections with the characters. Earth 2 Superman we talked about. Obsidian, we'll find out soon enough why he's chosen. And with Green Lantern, the entire thing is based off of Green Lantern cosmology, so you have to have a Green Lantern here. And if you're going to have him, then you pick the one that is currently wielding the ring, as you mentioned. So, So those were just some of the notes I had about some of that stuff.
Definitely an Earth 1 heavy bunch.
Yeah. Well, and you have to laugh at, Superman saying, all right, well, what could threaten both Earth 2 and Earth 1? Well, how about all the characters that ever threatened you guys in all those crossovers?
Yes. And like once a year for the last, 25 years.
Yeah. Don't be so naive, Superman.
Yeah. And Obsidian just kind of ducks the question. He can't even begin to think about what could threaten both Earths. He's still getting his head around the fact that he's in a room full of people from more than one Earth.
Yeah.
He's wondering aloud to Superman, you know everyone here? Some of these guys give me the spooks. And look at what character you see over his shoulder.
Oh.
That is unfortunate.
Yeah, I didn't even notice that. Yeah. Although in my book, he's green. His face is green.
Oh, yeah. You can see the skin tone in my book. So, yeah, that's good old-fashioned Earth 2 racism, right?
Oh, Jesus. Well, Todd Rice is not the most level-headed guy, right?
Yeah, well, he didn't have a very good father figure.
Right. And he wasn't...
And I'm not talking about Alan Scott. I'm talking about his adopted dad, Todd Rice. No, not Todd Rice. What is it, Jeremy Rice? Yeah, I think that was his adopted father's name, who was an abusive jerk.
And at least at this point, we don't know if Roy Thomas had any notions of making Obsidian homosexual, but he is in later publications. So, but he always came across as kind of like the Wally West of the Infinity Inc. group. He was kind of hot-headed and stubborn, and quick to judge.
Yes, fiercely overprotective of his sister Jade.
Mm-hmm.
Really didn't like her relationship with Brainwave Jr.
Right.
Then again, who wants their sister dating somebody named Brainwave Jr.?
I do like that the bottom panels, whereas the first sort of big panel across the 2 pages is, us getting into them individually, and all these 5 panels below, where in the middle of them, we get the shadow demons ready to attack. It's more about connecting the characters in ways that, like when would Arion ever really talk to Dr. Polaris? Ever.
Only in Crisis.
Right.
Only
but yet, like, Cyborg, Geoforce, and Simon, they're very related. They went up against each other, at some point. So I like that it kind of gets us a little deeper into the characters, these 5 panels.
Yeah, just the construction of it, too. Just the 5 main panels plus these little, interstitial panels in between of the shadow demons gradually creeping into the room. Overall, the effect, just visually, it kind of looks like cartridges on Batman's utility belt.
Yeah. Arion wondering if Dr. Polaris has sorcery, Polaris telling him to keep his hands off, or you'll find out the hard way. Firestorm sort of coming to terms with, hey, maybe Killer Frost isn't so bad after all.
Yeah, maybe I can make the most of this.
I do love that Simon is the one that's coming to Cyborg, and whether he has ulterior motives or not, saying, hey.
It's Simon. He always has ulterior motives. We
should declare a truce. Cyborg, Domehead, you can take that truce and shove it. And then he too senses danger, that we're about to be attacked.
And then the next 4 pages, a fight scene breaks out.
The first fight scene of the entire series, right? More or less, if you don't count the disaster chapters.
Right. Well, I guess. Killer Frost tries to attack Firestorm, but nothing much comes of it. So
yeah, got to have some action in a comic.
Yeah. Oh, and Blue Beetle beating up the terrorists or hostage holders, whatever they are. But yeah, this is the first really big brawl of the series.
Yeah, this is where you get you finally sort of get a little more explanation of what these shadows are. So all of our saying they have form and substance, but they're shadows. Again, their silhouettes very, if you're paying attention, kind of matching what we just saw with the monitor, which should make us either go, what's going on? Or if you're really intuitive, you can start to make connections of, duality and all that. And maybe the villain is very much like the Monitor.
Yes. Put on your Carl Jung hat and think in terms of shadows. But yeah, they got the capes, they got the prominent brows, they got those armor-plated epaulettes. So yeah. And Harbinger recognized them. Mm-hmm. So this all starts to add up.
Now,
and we don't know yet that they have the ability to cancel out human beings. I mean, we don't know how deadly these shadow demons really are just yet. They don't seem to be, acting to their full potential here.
Right, because they clearly wrap around Dawnstar, and they get, they're touching people, they're touching Geoforce, and yet they're not, making them explode or whatever it is that they're making them do, the humans, later, and heroes later. So it is kind of interesting that they're not, it makes you wonder, is this, again, did Wolfman not know quite yet? Obviously, he can't kill these characters. These are his talking points. These are his ways for readers to get into the series. So he can't just kill them off right away. So you just show them as a threat, but not exactly the full potential just yet.
And while the heroes engage them in battle for the first time, then we return to a point that you raised a while ago, Peter, with this panel with Lila. Once again, Lila in her purple or magenta flowing robe thing. Not Harbinger anymore. She's reintegrated. And she's saying to herself, "It's begun, and I can't even help. I've integrated my replicants, drawn them inside me again, but with only moments to spare. I cannot separate for so long, or my powers dissipate. And we, like the Earths themselves, would fade from existence. I am still so weak." So she's, in this panel, she's really drawing similarities between herself, her own vulnerability and that of the Earth's. She'd fade from existence, but implied there is also the fact that vulnerability comes from dividing herself, making herself into a multi-harbinger. It's like the universe is in danger because it's a multiverse when it maybe should have been just one universe all along. So that was a good catch you made a while ago there, Peter.
I love Obsidian's hesitation. Like living shadows, like myself. Can I fight them, or could they destroy me? And it's Superman who says, "Obsidian, they're surrounding us. We need you."
That's right, because Obsidian is of the self-obsessed, self-absorbed, self-seeking me generation. But greatest generation Superman just wades right in and starts punching.
Yeah, it's good characterization. It's very true to his characterization in the Infinity Inc. book. So I like that. We get more people meeting each other. Dawnstar meeting King Solivar, and you're an ape, but you can talk. You're a human with wings. Reality holds surprises for everyone. It's a little limiting on Dawnstar's part. I mean, she's from the future. She sees aliens daily. She likes a guy who's energy in a containment suit. Like, come on.
Yeah, that's a very good point. If of all those characters present, she's probably one of those least likely to be shocked by a talking ape.
Yeah.
Good point. But Solivar takes it in stride. Dispenses a little fortune cookie wisdom there. Reality holds surprises for everyone. Yeah, but Dawnstar, in her defense, she's being fairly rational on the preceding panel. She's actually reasoning this out.
It's a good observation, yeah.
There's no connection between most of us. We couldn't possibly have a common enemy, so why bring us here only to attack us? So she arrives at the conclusion that the Monitor and Harbinger are probably not responsible for this attack.
Right.
And then we see Blue Beetle holding his own here without the aforementioned Mystic Scarab. And the best he can do is just to leap out of the way of these things. He realizes he's way out of his league, so what in blazes do I do about it?
He's only out of his league for now.
Nah. And he'll be in a league.
I think a lot of this, too, is to showcase some of their powers, too, if you're not familiar with them, like how they work. There's a clear shot of Firebrand flying. She's been zipping around. Here she is using her powers. You can't have a cyborg appearance without the appearance of 1,000,000 decibels of white sound.
Even though it's pink sound in my copy. How about yours?
It is pink as well, yeah. That's a mistake. That's a mistake on the colorist's point.
Yeah.
It should be white.
Yeah, I didn't bring my hardcover along with me tonight, but I'd be willing to bet that's probably recolored white in there. But yeah, you're right. That's something he brings up every single time.
Oh, yeah. Then we see that Obsidian actually has an advantage, since he's a creature of shadow as well. And he could actually bypass them striking him and land a punch.
Yep, well, he's... Now, you mentioned earlier this whole crisis event is in a way born of the Green Lantern cosmology, because Wolfman found a way to tie it all back to the story in Green Lantern Volume 2, number 40. And, well, Obsidian is kind of a legacy of the Owens and the Guardians of the Universe himself, since he's the son of the Earth 2 Green Lantern. And he was, in a sense, sired by the Starheart, that conglomeration of ambient magic energy that the Guardians gathered together, crumpled up, and threw into the middle of a sun, and from whom Alan Scott has always derived his power, we eventually learn, by way of a form of retcon. So, I guess it's fitting that as a member of a part of a Green Lantern legacy, he should have some kind of active part to play here. But really, I think it's just Wolfman playing around with the fact that, they're shadows, he's kind of a shadow, what's going to happen?
Well, if you think about, the definitive... Because I was trying to think with Simon and Psychopirate, what other mentalists were there in the DC universe, Same thing with Obsidian. If you're going to go shadowy person, Nightshade wasn't around yet. I guess there's Shadow Thief, but he doesn't have enough presence,
Yeah,
so
literally.
Yeah. Dr. Polaris does his best Magneto trick. And he even says Master of Magnetism, to yank up the metal flooring and try to create a prison.
And Arion is still being that guy at the party who just latches onto you. You ever seen that episode of Animaniacs where Ben Stein did a guest voice?
No.
Yeah. He played Leo Pumphandle, but everyone calls me Pip. He corners the Warner brothers and the Warner sister at a party and just keeps on talking, nonstop about just stream of consciousness, this banal, boring nonsense for the entire 11-minute short. And the Warners are going crazy just trying to get rid of this guy, but he just keeps clinging. It's like Captain Linger to them. And that's kind of what Arion is doing here to Dr. Polaris. He's still hanging around him, talking to him. He seems to have convinced himself that Polaris is the closest thing to a peer he has at this gathering. It's just the way he's dressed, his dramatic flair, his arrogant bearing. Then all that bespeaks sorcerer to Arion. So and Dr. Polaris is not digging it. He's saying, "Do me a favor, magic man. Stay back and give me room to breathe."
Mm-hmm. It's funny. If you do go back to that double page of all the people, there's a hell of a lot of capes and cowls, or capes and collars.
Oh, yeah.
Solivar and Psychopirate, Superman, Obsidian, Arion.
I guess that was just the spring trend for 1985.
And then I guess we have to credit Killer Frost for naming these things. She says, as Green Lantern helps her and Firestorm capture one of them, she says, "Go find another shadow demon to fight." And that is kind of the unofficial official name, I guess.
Yeah.
Sort of what I've always called them.
Well, yeah, that's definitely the... I'd even go so far as to say the official name.
Yeah.
Because eventually that's all they're called. It might be just another one of those cases where it was a placeholder name that Wolfman used in his scripts. Just like the Anti-Monitor, for that matter. Originally, he was planning on coming up with something a little more descriptive, maybe a little better than just Anti-Monitor, but that's what he was calling the antagonist until such time, and eventually he just kind of decided that it worked well enough. There was a certain resonance to it, and he went with it and used it in the final script.
Yeah.
So it maybe the Shadow Demon name came from the same thought process.
Mm-hmm. Just trying to go through my notes here. Earth 2 Superman calls Cyborg by his name, so I can't remember anywhere that those two have connected prior to this. Doesn't mean that they didn't, but I'm finding trying to think back of where they could have connected. I mean, the obvious answer is maybe Superman heard Geoforce call him Cyborg, so he knows to call him Cyborg.
He does have super hearing. I'm sure he overheard that.
Right. But when I again, this was on this reading where I said, "Wait a minute, how would he know?" It made me think, now I got to go through and look through all their appearances and see if there ever was a precedence for those two characters meeting.
My instinct is that you're not going to find one.
Yeah. That's an interesting pairing there.
Yeah, so we've got this little quartet of panels here. The upper left is the Earth 2 Superman Cyborg one you mentioned. Then we have Dawnstar wondering aloud if anyone has seen Harbinger. She's still hanging out with Solivar, who says that Harbinger vanished long ago.
Even though Harbinger's watching them right now.
Well, yeah, that's kind of what unifies these four panels. They're arranged like that with an inset close-up of her eyes in the middle, and it's the weird little sort of hatching effect. You see that? All four of these panels are in the little diamond-shaped pixels.
Right, sort of suggesting that she's looking on them as through a monitor.
Right, viewing them through some kind of instrument, like field glasses or something.
Yeah, because that's also on the previous 2 pages too, where she's where Green Lantern is zapping one of the shadow demons. It also has that rounded edge panel thing and the hatching on there. Yeah,
which is a big. That's a Perez device.
Yep,
it's rounded like the corners of a monitor, like you said.
Mm-hmm.
Lower left, Ariana's exclaiming aloud that it was the female. Surely she knew of this. And Simon is joining right in on the hate parade in the lower right. And she'll suffer for it, my friend. Trust Simon for that. Yeah, so everyone's starting to wheel around on Harbinger. And she's just sitting there watching, feeling guilty, feeling helpless. Just like mother like daughter. She's like father like daughter. All she can do is watch. Yeah. Not everybody present is quite as wise and rational as Dawnstar in figuring out that Harbinger probably isn't responsible because, why would she gather this random assortment of people up here just to sick shadow demons on them?
And you would think with this collective group and their experience that they would know when you fight shadows, all you got to do is create a big bright light to defeat them, because that's exactly what happens with the extra little added detail that when the light does go off, in that instant, Obsidian is forced back into his non-shadowed form. While the demon shadows, there's another name, the attackers fearfully flee from the deadly flash.
And the heroes try to regain their vision, and then, look there, a dark shape moving in from the afterglow.
Oh no, it's another shadow demon.
Yeah, funny how it looks exactly like the shadow demons. Seen thus backlit in silhouette. And this final shadowy shape speaks, tells the assemblage, this attack was not planned, but it was also not unexpected. Please do not blame poor Harbinger. Of all beings, she was not at fault. Here, let me dim these halls so you may see things clearly once more. So finally we get one more coy little close-up shot of a gloved hand with a metal manacle thing behind it, pressing a couple of buttons on a console.
Before we go to that last page, let me just, another really interesting detail. Where they're flashed, where that panel is, where they're all blinded by the flash, if you count them, there's only 14, because Simon is up in the rafters. So you see how, Simon has always been up? He's always been up in that little rafter thing.
Because he's been around for 3 months. He's had a chance to explore. He knows the I guess, the safe vantage points, or maybe he just feels himself superior to everyone else, so he seeks the high ground for that reason.
And all the rest of them have been on the ground, so it's kind of a nice attention to detail there, not putting Simon in on that panel.
Now, if you can count on Perez for one thing, it's attention to detail. You can count on him for a lot of other stuff, too, but that's...
And if you want to take it further, too, Geoforce is actually on his knees because he's, in the past couple, in the fight sequence, he's been dragged downwards. You can see it on the previous page where he's 29, yeah.
His Shadow Demon dance partner is trying to drag him down through the floor.
So, just awesome little details there. So, all right, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt your final page. Revelation.
You interrupted at just the right time. I had nothing else to say.
Oh, okay.
And now we can turn the page to page 32, last of this issue, where the Monitor finally stands fully revealed.
In all his glory.
Yep. And he says to the group, "And now let me properly introduce myself. I am the Monitor, and I have summoned you here because your universes are about to die." Great cliffhanger there. Down below, next issue blurb, "This is only the beginning. Next issue, from the dawn of man to the great disaster." Yes, capital G, capital D, all you Kirby heads out there. This is a very specific great disaster we're talking about here. And then the tagline, "The DC Universe will never be the same."
So, awful logo for the Monitor. You think they would have came up with something a little better than that?
Yeah. Was it even meant to be a logo, do you think, or just
I think
emphatic lettering?
No, I think it's also used in Who's Who, too.
Really?
I think.
All right. Do you have Who's Who with you?
No, it's in the other room, but I'm going to quick do a Google search and see if I can find. Yep, there it is. It's the same exact wonky little blocky lettering without the exclamation point. How boring.
Yeah. I agree that they could have done better than that. If that's really meant to be his, signature font, as it were, they really could have done a better job than that.
I hope that wasn't Todd Klein's work. Because John Costanza is the letterer, but, Todd Klein usually always comes up with the logos. So,
even back in 1985?
I think so. I want to say, he had a hand in a lot of that stuff. His website is a great website where he goes through different variations of someone's title logo. Like he'll go through all the Batman logos and he'll go through all the Aquaman ones. And they're not, obviously he didn't do all of them if he did any of them, but he sort of shows why certain things were picked and his ideas on them. So it's a great website for that. But yeah, that always, and as a reader of DC at the time, if anybody was a longtime reader, you have to imagine, what was this last page to them? There it is. That's him. Okay. Well, we know nothing about him. Clearly, he's not an established DC character. His design is interesting. We're taking it for granted now because we just know what that design is. But I'm trying to remember at the time, what did I think of that? And I probably just was like, okay, cool. All right, there he is. Wow. Okay, that's the Monitor. In his skirt.
Tunic. To me, he's always kind of looked like a new wave caveman to me. And when we get around to reading the origin story of the Monitor and Anti-Monitor, as related in a later issue, I'll go into a little more detail about that.
Yeah, that makes sense.
That little belt buckle. It looks like a little wind turbine installed at his waist there.
Mm-hmm. So, there it is, issue 1. I have no more notes.
I believe, as Chris Eberly would say, we have shot our bolt.
3 hours later.
Just about 3 hours, yeah. And this is just for the second half of a normal-sized 32-page issue, albeit one without ads. Yeah,
clearly these issues are going to go 2-3-parter for each one, just so we can keep our sanity and also make sure we come out with more episodes.
Well, as we've already, I think, established, we've got plenty of episodes worth of stuff.
Yep.
Talking about the Crisis series itself, going in and out of the crossovers, and I have ideas for a couple of little detours we could take.
Great.
But for the time being, we are done, folks.
Awesome.
1 down, 12 to go, and then some. 11 to go, sorry.
Yeah.
It's late enough, I've forgotten how to subtract from 12.
All right. Let's wrap it up.
All right. Hope you enjoyed what we had to say about issue 1, folks. If you did, and also if you didn't, please stop by thecomicforums.com and seek out the TalkBat thread for the Crisis Tapes episode 11. Let us know how you thought we did with this. And if you have any Crisis Kid stories you'd like to share with us that we might get around to playing or reading on the air, those options again, email them to us at Peter or Murd at comicgeekspeak.com, or send us a voicemail at I've already lost the number, but we mentioned it a while ago. It was number 267-702-6642. That's our voicemail number. Or just go to that same thread I just mentioned at thecomicforums.com and post your stuff there. So, thanks for hanging around with us, folks. And hopefully we'll be back again before too much longer with another universe-shattering installment of the Crisis Tapes.
Sounds good.